Introduction. I want to make something absolutely crystal fucking clear. I'm not here to tell you the fluff, I'm here to tell you the stuff. What stuff is that, you ask? Wow, what a cute question. The stuff is my life. The stuff is my conquests, my triumphs, my dreams, my challenges, my foes, my unyielding talent, my unwieldy power, my normal-sized hands, and especially my awesome brain. I originally started writing this so that I could get my story straight for when I'm inevitably questioned by the police for my involvement in many crimes. As I begin writing, however, I instantly noticed just how amazing this journey truly was and how really cool I happened to be. So, I crossed a few I's and dotted a few T's, and just like that, I'm on my way to Novella Town, baby. I'd love to say that everything in this novella is fully above board and somewhere towards the right side of the law's understanding of right and wrong. Actually, I wouldn't love to say that because I'm not a square. That being said, my own understanding of right and wrong is completely out of whack, and I don't care what anyone has to say about it. Didn't ask. Write your own novella. The Library of Congress called me a kook when they introduced international smash bestseller Eggsploitation, the Sound-Ass story, into their rickety old vaults. I wanted to address that real quick before I get into the meat and bone of this adventure that I'm about to unfurl for you. I did not ask for worldwide superstardom. Okay, my history with Sound-Ass is hugely complicated, and I was hugely constipated the day I found out that the Library of Congress apparently thinks I'm missing marbles. I was in the bathroom all day, and they're out and about, spreading lies and throwing rumors at the clouds. Far before I became involved in one of the most unsuccessful success stories known to man, see Sound-Ass, I was just a young girl with big dreams. Well, my dreams were often quite small, but I would often grow into Mothra-sized fantasies. I was hired to be the Sound-Ass Foundation's official aviatrix and personal air pilot. I was, and still am, proud of this job. Frankly, I nailed it, like I nail everything I do. That being said, there is much more to me than this. I've never spoken to a person who knows more about anything than me. I am a complete and utter genius, and I wanted to take this time to personally condemn the Library of Congress, where a bunch of snide idiots who don't know anything about literature, know even less about the law, and practically know nothing about style. In exploitation, I helped aid in more crimes than one could count on two hands. Okay, exceeds 10. Though you're only hearing one side of the story. In my novella, within my pages, you'll hear what actually occurred and why I'm actually really cool. And it all started with a really, really long paragraph. Chapter 1. Arizona. Hello everyone reading this 1,000 years from now. I'm sure you're all leafing through this tale in your textbooks, as is my intention. My name is, and has been for quite a while, Flora McFauna. Yes, I've been told by people far more important than you how cool my name is. It is very unique, extremely bold, and profoundly awesome. I am really influential in my time, and I'm sure you have all heard of me and my cool name. I am here with you now in my pages, and that means I finally get to tell this damn story that I've been holding inside me for so long. I get to be the wise person on top of the mountain, finally talking down to my congregation. 100 years ago, if I told a story half as outrageous as this, no one would believe me. Of course, it's a new age. People are consuming more and more stories every day than they ever were before. Suddenly, a story as stupefying as this has become plausible. maybe plausible is the wrong word because it is truly a wild ride. And maybe I'm wrong in saying this, but no, I was right the first time. Plausible. But, okay, it's still hard to believe. Families keep tales like this one alive. They tell stories for years and years, and the kids hear it, and they tell their kids, and those kids tell a slightly different version to their kids, and so on. But this isn't one of those stories. This isn't some kind of ethical fable where two animals race each other or something, and then you're just left thinking, why am I reading about animals? Scummy little crappy things. This is an epic, a fantastical tale of pure thrills, like Moby Dick. But I can't really compare my own story to that one. It's truly a masterwork. As with a lot of stories, classic stories that is, I don't know if you know what an egotist is, but they always work their way into the story. Well, I'm afraid I'm gonna have to let my ego get the best of me this time, because you'll hear this story from my mouth, seen through my eyes. Sometimes I might tell a joke to make it seem like I have a free-flowing personality, but my whole personality is kind of a joke in and of itself. I guess that's what's funny. I'm just kind of figuring that out. It gives you the sense that maybe I haven't been paying attention very well. If that's what you're thinking, you're dead wrong. I pay close attention to everything. I can't possibly stress that enough. I can't really argue it much beyond that, but you'd be foolish to think otherwise anyways. Wow, this intro really makes no sense at all. Listen, I'm telling you this story, and I will get to the story in a minute, because I probably don't have a lot of time left to tell it. Like always, the long arm of the law is always on their way to come clean my clock, if you catch my meaning. Now, I caught mononucleosis by sitting in a subway train with an open bullet wound, don't ask, and I don't know if you know anything about mono, but you're not really supposed to apply pressure to your organs or they collapse or explode or something. Okay, don't quote me on that. But anyway, if the long arm of the law throws me around when arresting me with fury and vengeance, as I have a feeling they might do, I may find myself in the obituary papers this time tomorrow. That's why I'm telling the story, and it really is a great story, I promise. But there's one thing you gotta know before I start the story. It is essential to understanding the meaning of all this. The story is in many parts. It's not just one free-flowing narrative uninterrupted by nonsense. It's made up almost entirely of nonsense. Now, this isn't some time travel sci-fi bullshit where I pet a dinosaur and lay a caveman. No. This first part is just the appetizer. And maybe the first course. Maybe the second course too, depending on how many courses there are. For example, if there are only 3 courses, then this first part acts as the first course, or maybe the first course and the first half of the second course. I'd prefer if there were 4 courses, because then it's half and half. But then again, this first part's a little shorter than the next part, I think. But now I'm thinking, are all the courses the same amount of food? Because the shorter one is like the first part, presuming that's the course order. It wouldn't really make any sense for the first part of the story to be the second course, and the second part to be the first course. Well, now that I'm thinking about it, I've almost completely left out the appetizer, and that started the whole analogy. Okay, honestly, that might be the most important part. As long as there's no dessert in the mix, then I think this analogy could work with some extra thought. If we add dessert, then I gotta rework some things. If you could try to keep this failed analogy out of mind while I tell my story, I'd really appreciate it. I'm actually a really good storyteller. Maybe analogies just ain't my bag, but really, I am a great storyteller. One of the best, probably. Top 10, at least. And this story that I'm going to tell you is really going to blow you away. Guaranteed. It's got a little something for everybody. Intrigue, romance, violence, unlikely heroes. Man, it's got it all. If there were an objective means of determining what the top 10 best stories of all time is, You bet your ass is gonna be in that top 10. Number 1 would still be Moby Dick, though. That was a big-ass whale. So cool. But, okay, this story doesn't have whales in it. The first part doesn't even have water in it. See, the story begins, as all stories do, in the dusty wilderness of Arizona desert landscape. But before I get into that, though, I really want to hammer home that this story will change you. I'm just so glad to finally be able to tell it. It's funny, I've been telling this story for so long to so many people, and I don't even know where to start. And where do you start with a story as electrifying as the one I'm about to tell? I guess I shouldn't have asked you, you've never heard it, but you will, and it will be the best story you've ever heard, and I can tell you that with the utmost certainty. Unless you've read Moby Dick. That's a good story too. I really like whales, probably because I've never seen one. Like I said, water in general is hard to come by where I was born. And where I was born, you may ask? Well, as I said, I'm from the Arizona desert. I once laid my hat in a small town called Ventil near Sedona. Like many towns around me, we were hit hard by a water drought a few years back. I guess calling it a water drought is redundant, but it was a drought all right. A bad one. Kids were walking around trying to suckle milk straight from the town's cow, Bessie, just to have something to drink. Bessie is a nice cow. She's brown and huge. She's one of my favorite things about this old town, to be sure. But anyway, the story ain't about Bessie. And may I remind you that the story is incredible. It's really solid. I was born to 2 potato farmers named Sickley and Crumb. Art Sickley was raised back in the old times, sometime after the Third Animal War. And he was a really racist old kid. He was always talking about foreign politics. He didn't understand something about them damn babbles and how they're always taking advantage of the dukes. I often ignored it because it wasn't my place to judge someone who was clearly rattled from animal warfare. That being said, I resented him at an early age and vowed to oppose his will in any and every possible way. I mean, his whole life was potatoes. Where did potatoes come from? The ground. And where do I have all my best ideas? The sky. Just saying. My mother, Vert Crumb, was mute. I didn't know anything about her because I wasn't much for interpreting thoughts. This will make a lot more sense later, but I swear I can't for the life of me understand Griffley for this exact reason. I didn't talk to my parents much and ended up running away from the family farm when I was 16. I ran away with another 16-year-old boy named Humphrey G. He had this sick, crazy dream of becoming a janitor. We were going to live in a little straw hut somewhere, him being a full-time janitor and me doing freelance sewer stuff. That was my dream back then. I just wanted to do sewer stuff. I always kind of wanted to become a frequent flyer too, but I was too afraid of heights. One night, me and Humphrey G climbed to the top of a hospital parking lot, one of those really big ones that was like 20 stories tall. We were looking up at the stars, and I was thinking about my life up to this point. I glazed over much of it because there isn't much to tell. In the 16 years I had been alive, I hardly accomplished anything of note. I mean, when I was 10, I threw a brick through the glass door in front of a grocery store, but that was about it. And trust me, if you knew the full story... Okay, the point is, I felt unfulfilled. I wanted to float into the air and become a permanent fixture in the sky. But I was too cowardly to make my dreams come true. So, I was looking out at the stars, occasionally looking down at the street 20 floors below us. That's when I decided to let go of my inhibitions and just fly. I was afraid of heights no longer. I ran full speed and jumped off that building like a sickly 16-year-old airborne creature. I flew for about 3 seconds, then plummeted to the earth below. I hit every damn awning on the way down. Didn't know there were so many awnings. LOL. I've been on the lookout for awnings ever since. Anyway, I cracked about every bone in my body like a sickly 16-year-old egg. Humphrey G. was horrified. Broke up with me on the spot. Whatever. Didn't need him now that I had all these bone contusions. I crawled to the hospital down the street, but you know how that story goes. It was a long night. I was full of regret, Diet Dr. P, the good stuff, and a whole lot of regret. When I arrived at the hospital, all the doctors and nurses acted like they saw a ghost. That was because my shadow is so long and scary. They picked me up and put me on one of those rolling things. What are those called? You know those things they put you on so you can roll around? Around the hospital? So they can get you from point A to point B more, better, whatever. I'm not remembering this anytime soon. Once they took me off the gurney and onto the hospital bed, they got to work. The doctors gave me a second heart, a third lung, and took out my appendix. I'm practically a superhuman. It took them 100 days of nonstop surgery before I was officially considered back to normal. I was doing jumps and hops. I sprinted. I was so cool to be able to do jumps and hops and sprint. It had been 100 days since I was last able to do those things. I was now 17 and as determined as ever to be my own person, and at that moment I vowed never to jump off a hospital rooftop again. There were a few times I really wanted to, but I didn't because I remembered my previous experiences and decided to make different choices. I am alternative. As it happens, I hadn't really left town yet. I did run away from the family farm, but only about a block and a half. I was still stuck in Ventil and looking for any chance to get the hell out of Dodge that came along. Little did I know there was still much to do before I could be on my way. Unfortunately for small me, there was a huge drought still going on that I really haven't been stressing enough. I hadn't drank water in 100 days, and I was parched. One day, as I was creeping in the sewers, I thought I had stumbled across two giant rats. They chased me through the Ventil catacombs, the sludge pockets, and even the Midway Stop and Slop sewer mayhem experience. Eventually, one of them tackled me. That's when I realized I was being chased by two government employees named Hugh Butters and Funk Diamond. They were weaselly and fully of holes, which is what made me think they were rodent creatures. Turns out, it was just Butters and Diamond. Funky Butters! The Funk Butt Duo! Anyway, they didn't seem to take kindly to my frequent hobby of wandering throughout the sewers unsupervised, packaging sludge in my pockets and selling it on the streets. This was the only way I could make money back in those days. They took me, arm in arm, to Gooey Sanders, the mayor of Ventil. He was to give me a stern talking to on the do's and don'ts of felony theft and public intoxication, on account of the effects of the sludge. One word, no can do, he said powerfully. That was Gooey. He was a smooth talker, a fast talker, and a soothsayer. He always knew what to soothsay. And he always smooth talked it to me fast, so I told him what's what. Listen, Gooey, I'm trying to make enough money to buy a bus ticket out of this place. Then you'll never have to worry about me again. Understood? Is what I told that old bastard. That's why I'm selling sludge on the streets, and that's why you never see me and the sewer stealer in the same room. I am her and she is me. Gooey stood up in his chair and looked out his one-story window overlooking a single cactus in the dry Arizona heat. Yes, this drought is driving away many of our residents. I wish there was a way to stop nature dead in its tracks. But as far as I know, there ain't. My eyes darted around his office madly. I was partly seizing, partly sneezing. I felt like a part of me was even smartly wheezling. This was all a side effect of being a badass. That's when I saw the giant map beside his desk. It was a map of Lake Fritz, just 700 miles away from Ventile. "Verb," I said to no one. "I know what I'm doing today." It was finally time to actualize my cool frequent flying dream, so I decided to steal the helicopter from the rooftop of the mayor's office. I wanted to jump down onto the street and try to fly again, but I had a big plan, and big plans don't go to sleep. So says Flora McFauna. It was around this time I called Steezy, who was a sludge customer I knew all too well. He put me in contact with his friend Shantley, who put me in touch with his neighbor Crunko, who then put me in touch with his Uncle Pippo. See, Uncle Pippo was a get-it guy. Anything you could ever need, he could get it. And fast. I'm being unclear. Uncle Pippo had deep ties to the black market. He was a hardened criminal, allegedly a serial killer, and also old as hell. I'm talking 50. I stole the helicopter and flew it to Uncle Pippo's hideout miles outside of town. At first, since I had no idea how to fly a helicopter, I made a few rudimentary mistakes. I hit a few hundred birds, airdropped a giant storage container onto an electrical plant, and even launched a homing missile at a nearby nature preserve. So what? Sue me. If you're actually threatening litigation, though, write me a letter, then shred it. I hid the helicopter behind the trees in Pippo's backyard, then I greeted him with a hearty salute. He knew what I was there for, and he already had gotten it. A giant bucket, like water tower sized, a huge hook, and some rope. We attached all the gear to my new helicopter experience on the bottom and got to work. Pippo hopped in the helicopter passenger style, and I flew that thing up in the air. I had no idea how to fly in those days, but like any smart and very cool person, I just learned by doing. We went to Lake Fritz in a hurry. Pippo needed to watch Guiding Light at 8. Can you believe that's not on the air anymore? We had to pull this off quick. I hovered over the lake and Pippo jumped in diver style. I lowered the giant bucket, and he started sucking the water in his lungs and then making himself throw it back up in the bucket. He did that for about an hour or two, maybe 3. I don't know. I was listening to music. After a little while, we had a full water tower tank of puke water ready to be carried to Ventile to solve this drought once and for all. On the way back, Pippo told me he had cut himself on a rock on accident and was losing a lot of blood. There was a lot inside of the tank, too. So after rolling my eyes, I kicked it into 3rd gear. I started doing flips and shit. I was going fast. And in about 20 minutes, I was flying over Ventile. As you can tell, I was pretty much a natural. I learned how to fly like a bird learning to fly, and solving a drought was about the easiest thing a girl could do to pass the time. Once I finally reached Ventile, I knew it was finally time to cement myself as a legend. "Now!" I yelled as we hovered over Ventile's unnamed town square. Pippo knew what that meant. He cut the rope with a knife, and this huge, giant, massive tank of water plummeted full speed onto the earth below, exploding. A little bit of water landed in every townsperson's mouth, and the water that landed on the ground instantly grew grass and other foliage. Watermelons, maybe. "Droughty, go bye-bye," I said in disbelief. I did it. I was officially an aviatrix, and I never looked back. If I could feel this powerful and successful every day, then I'm in business. I threw Pippo out of the helicopter and just kept flying for days with no idea of where I was headed or where I'd ever end up. So began a new chapter of my life. And trust me, a new chapter is about to begin. Quite literally. I became a master of my craft, flying that damn plane over the US of A. Of course, I didn't limit myself to the US. It's a figure of speech. And I'm a figure to teach. to teach you important info on my life and these times within my pages. Chapter 2, Brunswick. Things get a little spicy around here. In fact, things get a little dicey, too. See, flash forward 10 years or so, and I've successfully raised the dead, sank an entire country, created a new religion, found all the sacred keys, and even made a little bit of rock and roll. I'd love to go into all these flashy stories, so I will, bit by bit, with a few choice flashbacks. Not yet, though. Most of this nonfiction novella takes place in the present, now that it is the past, but all the time it was the present. And what sort of presents did I meet in the present? Or that present? Well, presently, at least presently in the past present, I was opening up a few presents on Christmas morning. Yes, December 25. A super sexy day of the year when it is very cold and frightful outdoors. I go flying often and paint my plane an off-white bluish sort of number. Then I fly around town and scare the locals. Where do I live, you ask? Well, at this point in my life, I lived in the quiet beach community called Juicy Jazzland. Picture more sand than you've ever seen before in your life. This was so much less than that. There was hardly any sand here at all. A whole lot of sharp, jagged rocks, though, and hail that fell from the sky and latched to the ground, becoming permanent ice crystals. And surrounding the town was a huge icy cavern that was born of stretched fiberglass and spray-painted the color of snow. Of course, during the winter, the snow covered the top of this beautiful dome, making it sufficiently a closed-in ice nightmare. That was Juicy Jazzland, and that was my home on the range. How does a pilot fly around a place like Juicy Jazzland, you ask? First of all, if you ask one more question, I'll make you feel new, painful sort of things you're not exactly kind of used to experiencing. It's easy. Towards the top of the ice nightmare were huge openings for importing and exporting. Obviously, you need a license, which I never obtained, and a permit to enter and exit, which I wouldn't be caught dead with. See, I'm not a square. I'm as round as they come. And I'm of sound mind and body and hottie. This is it. So, yeah, my hat laying on the icy dunes of Juicy Jazzland, but all that was about to change. I mean, obviously, my summer home is in JJ, but for the next long while, I'll be FFH, far from home. This all started when I was past presently presented with a precious present containing a presence past presently known precisely as Brunswick. Brunswick changed everything. Let me explain who Brunswick is really quick. Okay. There was just a normal cardboard box wrapped in that kind of stuff, the paper stuff you wrap Christmas presents in, the paper for wrapping presents, whatever. There was a lot of that, and duct tape. Whatever was in this box was about to be a huge pain in the ass to unearth. There was a card attached. You've got what I need, it said, unquestionably. When I finally got through the wrapping paper, duct tape, booby traps, and all the other various information brochures stuck inside, I met Brunswick. A small talking envelope. How did I know he could talk? Well, he started talking. But first he started bouncing off the walls, breaking every single thing in the house, before hovering slightly before me. Then he started talking with this low, booming voice. "Flora McFauna," he cried. "You have been chosen by me, the great scientist and fungus completionist Burton Fungler of the Fungler Institute for Boys, to accompany me in my talking envelope Brunswick on a worldwide trek to retrieve the finest instrumentalists of our generation so that we may piece together the fabled Fungler Philharmonic. I await your response soon. Please visit me in Rare Groove so that we may discuss this further. Fungler out." Then complete silence. Then boom, boom, boom. 3 gunshots cracked through my living room window. Yep, I knew it was bound to happen. 3 cops, also known as Foreshadow Brothers, were on my tail for squatting. Currently, I was squatting some random woman's home while she was away on vacation. It was the house I was past presently in, the one Brunwick just destroyed. "Hey, Toots, looks like you got company," spoke Brunwick shortly after the shots rang out. "It seems I do," I responded, really cool and rationally. I walked up to the door and lured one of the Foreshadow brothers, Dink Foreshadow, into my ex-home with my wild thighs, and as soon as I closed the door behind him, I gouged his eyes out with a small teaspoon I found nearby. Meanwhile, Brunwick launched out of the now broken window and flew at such a daring speed that he was able to slit Junk Foreshadow and the Crother Foreshadow's throats with one fatal swoop. As we stood over the bodies, the only thing I could think was, shit, I gotta get out of here. So I hopped in my helicopter out back, and me and Brunwick booked it. Next stop, Rare Grove, I thought. Turns out, not so easy. See, I forgot about these stupid bastards at the Airway Docking Transport Hull Hub Hallway. It's this giant hole in the side of the dome. You can't miss it. If you want to leave Juicy Jazzland, this is how you got to do it. So I pull my helicopter up, all cool and sly, and then I see this guy with a blue jumpsuit floating lightly above his desk. "ID number?" he asked, irreversibly. "Yeah," I said. "I don't mess around with all that kind of stuff. Too many bad vibrations." "Yeah," Brunwick repeated. "She don't mess around with all that kind of stuff. Let us through or you're through. Yeah, I'm talking to you. You! The one floating lightly above your desk. If you know what's good for you, you'll let us through. Yeah, you." "Yeah, you," I repeated. "If you know what's good for you, you'll quit floating lightly above your desk and do what's good for you by letting us through, buddy." I had a hunch. A nasty, disgraceful hunch. This guy just simply wasn't going to let us through. "Hunch be gone," he replied, unconstitutionally. "There's simply no way that I will never let you through this here gate." We had to improvise. I put my chopper at full speed and blast right through one of the fiberglass walls of JJ, forming a new hole altogether. Behind me, the structure of JJ's outer curves began to crumble and fall apart and crumble apart. "Bingo," I said slyly. "Next stop, Rare Groove." Chapter 3. Fungler. Once I left Juicy Jazzland, I was quickly made aware of how the weather is much better everywhere else in the world. It's just kind of always hailing within the walls of JJ, and I'm always wailing within the pages of my memoir. This one. Which one? Listen up. I'm not holding your fucking hand. This is my story. I'm the god of my pages. Me and Brunwick flew through the cloud town of Meadsbrook. Actually, a really funny thing about Meadsbrook, it gets its name from a guy whose last name was Meadsbrook. I had to get gas, and there was the first cloud town. We passed a mile, so we had to stop. Brunwick wanted to get novelty sunglasses from Stop and Shop. God bless him. I did too. While I was filling up, Brunwick entered this quaint station simply titled Big Station, Big Dreams. I didn't know what that meant, but my dreams were always somewhat small in nature. Though occasionally they would balloon to almost Mechagodzilla-esque proportions. I was getting the side-eye from a wide-snide and politely unwise guy called Fry. Well, I didn't know his name was Fry at the time. I figured it out a few seconds later, though. he was wearing a name tag. Nonetheless, he did approacheth me to ask where my hat was often to be lain. Nowhere in particular, sir, I replied, wide-eyed and full of pride. See, I'm a drifter. The road is my home. Well, not the road so much as the sky road. I'm a patron of the clouds, a connoisseur of the airways, such as yourself, I can tell. I used to have my hat firmly loined in juicy jazzland, and before that, somewhere in the wide Arizona, though I'm not comfortable enough in mind and spirit to reveal the name of my birth town to the likes of you. Good God, look at your filthy face and body. You're so smelly and uncool. Now I'm drifting, going from cloud to cloud, smelling the stench of the up high, eating at restaurants. You understand. I don't need to explain myself to someone named Fry. Right, Fry cried. I tried to be mighty polite, but I would have liked a lighter insight. He then grabbed the thing that was on his belt that one would use to talk to someone else far away. What was that called? Not a phone. Like a thing where you could walk and talk at the same time while maintaining a certain level of connectedness with those far away. We got another one, he spoke into the walkie-talkie. Damn, I didn't even know that was there. I was too busy thinking of all the cool sunglasses Brunswick was probably trying on without me. I bet they have the cool glasses that are shaped like hearts or the present year. Instead, I was stuck with a trite, unkind sight like Fry. Within minutes, 3 horsemen approached me and Fry. They were hooded and fragmented, though I could just barely make out their cranial front pieces, faces, eye roll. It took me no time to realize that I was looking at the manifestation of Dink, Junk, and Crother's foreshadow. See, I don't expect you to know this, but when you have a pilot's license, well, not that I have one, but when you have an airplane, you are afforded some certain luxuries. One of which is the ability to visit cool cloud towns like Meatsbrook. The only problem with cloud towns is you often have to face the personified souls of those you've conquered. Frankly, I didn't have the energy to kill the Foreshadow brothers again, so I ran inside Big Station, Big Dreams, and found Brunswick. Damn it, I thought they did have the sunglasses with a present year on them. You know, the cool ones where you can look through the 0 in 2015 or 2005. This takes place in one of those years, though. Like, I'm hazy, and lazy. Not enough energy to tell you what year this takes place in. God. So the Foreshadow brothers followed me into Big Station, Big Dreams, which was a misleading title, as the station itself was kind of small. As an aside, my dreams weren't very big either, though occasionally they looked like giggin'. Dink placed a stasis spell on the board, though the attack was mostly ineffective. It managed to hit the station owner anyway, don't know his name. It was my move. I used a pitchfork found in the sporting goods section. This place was huge, and put a massive hole through the middle of Junk Foreshadow. It did a little bit of damage, but could have been better. Junk was incapacitated and couldn't take his turn, so Crothers cast an illumination spell. It was super bright in the station all of a sudden. Then it was Brunswick's turn, but he passed. So, since it was so bright, I just ran away and hid in the frozen food aisle. See, any other time, I would fight with my heart's might. But these weren't the Foreshadow brothers. These were the Foreshadow's souls. Souls are much harder to conquer than typical humans. I'm writing a separate novella about this topic exclusively once I'm done with this. Fry shot a whole magazine of bullets, Bullet Weekly, through the glass at the front of the station because he thought he saw me. Turns out it was so bright he mistook me for the Gull File. I'm trying not to overthink that. Anyway, while everyone was distracted, I grabbed onto Brunswick and he huffed and puffed and flew right out of the window. We hightailed it to the helicopter and waved goodbye to Meatsbrook for the day. Unfortunately, the souls of the Four Shadows and the soulless Archangel Fry would cause me to further discomfort in the future. This wasn't over. Hey, tits! This here map says Rare Grove is that-a-way, spoke Brunwick, pointing with his googly eyes at a small landmass in the middle of the ocean. Unmistakable yet mistakeably easy to mistake for something else. Additionally, near impossible to even register in the first place. So be it. I cooled my jets and landed my cool jet. Cool jet equals helicopter, where I'm from, on what I assumed was heli deck. No. I came to realize, simply a barn. Nonetheless, I entered the town square, quad, with the unmistakably recognizable Brunwick in search of the mistakably unrecognizable Burton Fungler. He was unrecognizable to me at the time because I hadn't met him yet, but once I had, you couldn't miss him. Brunwick stands out because he is a talking envelope that could also hover in the air pretty unmistakably. That being said, I would often mistake it for other things. Things simply need to stop being said on my account. Am I writing a fucking dictionary here? Ignore me. Ignore me. That's what I told the mayor of Meatsbrook. That happens later. Tough crowd. Yeesh. Unmistakably tough. Though it could be mistaken for firm. Anyway. Did you know that chimpanzees sometimes hunt and eat small mammals, such as bushbuck or monkeys? What's the big fucking deal? Didn't know there weren't monkeys, huh? It's not like they only eat that. Quit yapping. They eat fruits, nuts, seeds, blossoms, leaves, and many kinds of insects, too. Jesus, I can't win with you guys. Burton was unmistakable. He was something like 9 feet tall. He had a huge overbite. Like a good science man would. Long, weaselly blonde hair. Like a demented riffraff. It's like a riffraff from hell. Just doing some Richard Lewis. I wish I could put voice memos in this book. I talked to my friend a good bit about it, and we couldn't figure out the technology. We both think maybe Goosey knows, but he won't tell us. More on that later. Hello and goodbye, I said to Burton. He wasn't getting me that easy. I turned around and got back in my chopper and flew away. I was gonna come back. I was just playing hard to get. I was flying off the handle mentally, and Brunwick was trying to reel me back in. He began. You know, that was the Fung man, eh? Yousa should be patting his back, not giving him an attack. A heart attack for walking away. Within good time, you little weasel, I replied unmistakably. I'm flying my chopper up, then down. We will return to Fung's quad. I went up and down a few times just to really make him feel like an asshole. LOL. Sometimes I'm a little crazy. I'm gonna throw in some free verse right now. Actually, fuck free verse. I'm not Kerouac. Stupid hack. I'm gonna rap. Nah. I'll do it later. I can't think of anything right now. Parked the chopper on a school. Didn't know Terry Fader was a professor. You live and you learn. I'm still living in the living phase. I'll learn later. Burton approacheth me with a weird sort of swank prance. I'm sure there's a better term for that, but I'm not a linguist. That would be Brunwick. Hello, I said to Burton. Hello, Flora, he replied and cried, nice and polite like a bright guy. I'm glad you could make it. Your aviatrixing is exactly the type of wild and demented and cool sort of thing I need for my Philharmonic to take flight. I'm paraphrasing. I don't often pay close attention to Fungler. He talked for hours. He was briefing me on every single little detail. I didn't hear any of it. I actually put in earplugs at some point and he didn't even call me out on it. All I knew was I was supposed to pick up those of which I found to be the very best for his Philharmonic. After I Googled what a Philharmonic was, I got the iPhone. I knew exactly where to start. Chapter 4. The Conch. Rare Groove was notable for drawing in many different types of tourists, from the plump, circular, scientist types to the more angular, round bottoms, which I felt existed only to torment me, lol. However, people came from far and wide for many different varieties of eggs. Rare Groove was an island particularly made up of eggs. There were eggs coming from the trees, growing from the dirt like beanstalks, and overflowing the mesas. Yes, eggs were our game, but Rare Groove was our name. Burton Fungler, however, managed to corner a very different sort of market entirely. In a world run by eggs, one man must set himself aside and assist the fungus. Whoa, man, that was the Fung Man. He was tall as hell. 9 feet? He had long blonde hair like a good scientist should. He was stiff like a popsicle stick and sick like a 5th pickled kid. 4 times is fine for a growing boy, but 5 is downright murder. He smelled lively and would often spring into action when the time was right, but well reserved during times of conflict within the U.S. and other countries. A patriot at heart. One day, Fungler was cleaning out the inner chamber of his multi-studio den, resting squarely between the gastrointestinal distress unit and the Rare Groove Island helicopter tour Grand Slam grandstand, where he noticed a room filled with unfurnished soda cans. A room he had never noticed in all of his years of living in the Fungler den. Within each unfurnished soda can were neighborhoods, streets, rec centers, skyscrapers, you name it, of bacteria. The fungus growing in all the different cans became a simple twist of fate when, as a token of his esteem, he scooped them up and squashed them out. He initially charged $1.75 just for a peek, and $17.50 for the whole can, until he realized just how lucrative his newfound business opportunity was. He upped the price exponentially. Though I remember a lot of specific and needless details, I don't at all remember how much the price was after he upped it. Before long, Fungler was an international hit. His fungi kingdom was the subject of high praise, and his business and world-building strategies were unmatched. Just speaking the words Burton Fungler in certain parts of the U.S. caused many denizens to take off their hats and salute. Fungler never let this get to him, though. He was a humble man, and rested in Rare Groove, where it all began. He was king and he knew it, but some things are important. From To Kill a Desire. The Sound-Ass Story. I'm ripping that quote from a less cool book with an alternate title, no less. Remember when it wasn't called Eggsploitation? I don't. This is news to me. Also, it's to kill all desire, not to kill a desire, but whatever. I'm doing it so I don't have to properly explain Dr. Fungler. He was a complicated man, and it would take a mind finer than mine to mine the minds of Fungler's mind. See, my mind is right out there. You walk up to me, you speak to me, you know what? I'm Flora McFauna, baby. Truth be told. Listen, I have to diverge from the path of my story to tell you about something else, something mightier than my exploits, the conch. This wasn't an ordinary conch shell, because it wasn't a conch shell. It was just what this happened to be called. Not an idea, but a tangible thing. The conch, as it were, was the sacred earring. It was passed down from generation to generation. It can be traced as far back as ancient Egypt, all the way back to 1930s Brooklyn. Then one day, it disappears. Well, that is until 2015. The conch reappears in the hands of a homeless man I came across while in Norco, Louisiana, on assignment. He was offering jewelry at a reduced rate. Poor bastard had no idea what he was selling. This wasn't just an earring. It was a key. I bought it off him. He asked for $5, but I gave him 10. I didn't have a $5 on me. The earring glowed a reddish kind of glow. I knew what I had in my hands was mightier than man itself. I did extreme historical research on the artifact. I called Terry Fader, and I had him inspect its legitimacy. He has a school, so it was all above board. It was all true. I owned the conch, and the conch, with its unorthodox and dense history, was in my hands. With it in my possession, nothing was out of reach. Anyway, so I was in Norco because I was trying to recruit Fuzzbucket for the Fungler Philharmonic. If you don't know who Fuzzbucket is, all I can say is you're probably better off that way. He's this small rodent creature. Apparently he's a troll. I just looked him up on Wikipedia. I don't know. He looks kind of like a wrong possum. Say what you will, though. But he was always dressed to impress. He was working on a sludge slushy in the bowels of Norco, which, if you don't know anything about Norco, is a town that's essentially a giant refinery. There's so much waste in the sewers, and the whole place is crawling with radioactivity. It's actually a surprise there aren't more of these little rat weirdos. Apparently Fuzzbucket isn't from Norco. Just check the wiki again. Nonetheless, there were a myriad of strange and unruly creatures that lived among Fuzzy. I had heard about Fuzzbucket from Uncle Pippo. See, in the late 90s, Uncle Pippo helped him disappear after a triple homicide murder charge. Fuzzbucket had apparently become intoxicated and beat 2 men to death with the tail end of a club, then strangled a third man who was witness to the act. After being put behind bars and hoping for a plea deal, Fuzzy used his sharp and gross teeth to bite through the jail cell bars. Pippo was Fuzzy's getaway driver when they would rob liquor stores and small diners, so it made sense that he would be the one to shelter Fuzzy in his time of need. Many years passed, and the law still hadn't caught up with Fuzzbucket. That being said, it was surprisingly easy to find him. Apparently in 2012, he turned his sewer den into a strange rodent apocalyptic discotheque. Fuzzbucket had formed some kind of cult regarding the 2012 apocalypse, and when the apocalypse didn't come, reshaped his cult's belief to be centered around, and I can't fully explain this, Michael Chiklis. So, as he finished up his slushy with a rerun of The Shield playing quietly behind him, he finally uttered his first phrase to me with his raspy, phlegm-fueled voice. I can have, be playing the violin for this guy? Great, I replied, stereotypically. Can we fly you over to Fungler now, or do you need some time to pack your things? Okay, as I said that, a letter dropped in through the sewer cracks. Fuzzbucket scurried over to it, opened it up, and focused on it for a bit. He took a pause, turned around, and exclaimed, "We got a FUKCOFT." In my helicopter, miles above Norco, I pressed Fuzzbucket to explain what was so urgent about our departure. To which he casually mentioned that a loan shark he owed money to was on his way to the police to spill the beans on another pending murder trial Fuzzbucket's attached to. It appeared that there was a string of questionable drug-related murders across the U.S. from someone they were calling the Harry Slayer. Fuzzbucket hadn't been placed to all of these crimes, but this loan shark, one Fred Powerhouse, was going to tell the cops everything Fuzzbucket told him when they were on heroin together. So, me and Fuzzbucket made it back to Rare Groove safely, and I gotta be honest, Fungler wasn't impressed. Hell, I wasn't impressed either. And I like the movies where dogs can talk. If Fuzzbucket were a talking dog, I'd like him a lot more. I actually knew 2 talking dogs. Well, I didn't know them, but I know them now. They're really cool, but I'll get to them later. This is about Fuzzbucket. Well, it's about me, but also Fuzzbucket. And Fungler. Brunswick too. You're really trying to sidetrack me, aren't you? The conch would frequently glow and vibrate wildly. I wore it around my neck like a badge of fucking honor, but these strange lasers were starting to shoot out of it like it was being possessed by the spirit of my grandma. Tough old lady. I had to step away from Fungler, who was just getting acquainted with Fuzzbucket. Fuzzbucket was trying to sell him one of the watches he kept in his overcoat. As I looked down at the conch, a face started to appear in the reddish rock. It was the face of the then recently deceased Joan Rivers. Her face kept smacking the inside of the rock, and she began to yell, "Let me out of here!" I didn't understand how Joan Rivers got into the conch like that, but I didn't have time to understand it. I was on a Fungler mission still. I called Brunwick over, told him to put the conch inside of himself. It sounds weird when I say it like that, but he's an envelope, you know? You put stuff in envelopes. Ugh, you guys are so dirty. Hey, sure thing, boss, Brunwick replied. What's the move with Mr. Charismatic over there? He motions towards Fuzzbucket. I just say leave him here, I replied. Let's just let Fungler deal with them, sucker. I laughed with Brunwick heartily. Then got in my chopper and ascended. I looked down and I saw Fungler eyeing me like I was a psycho. I am! Fungler, I love messing with that guy. Chapter 5. I was flying my chopper a little too fast for a little too long and found myself somewhere over in New Mexico. If this were a normal day, I would have kept flying aimlessly until I stumbled across, by sheer luck and cool skill, a master instrumentalist for Fungler's crew. I was feeling a little different today, though. My mind was wandering aimlessly. I saw loose images in my head of a dog, a kid, an old woman, a sidewalk, etc. I couldn't make sense of the images popping in and out of my head, and I started to feel beads of sweat on my forehead. Brunwick was trying to explain the plot of Multiplicity to me when I just let go of the controls. The helicopter started to slowly spin around and around, getting closer and closer to the ground, and I could have stopped it from crashing. I'm that good of a pilot, but I didn't. Instead, the helicopter crashed at full speed behind some old farm. As I lied on my back in the wreckage, a big chunk of helicopter fell over, crushing my stomach further, and I looked up to a completely clear night sky. I remember thinking that if I died right here, it would be a shame that there were no stars out for me to look at one last time. My eyes started to open and close slowly, and I could feel my breaths becoming further and further apart. Goodbye, you sick twits, I thought. Flora McFauna is out of here. But damn, I realized how quiet it was when Brunwick wasn't talking. I actually felt like I was alone. And I was dying on my back, trapped under some metal, looking up at an empty sky, in complete silence. Ambulances arrived almost immediately, and I was rushed in critical condition to the nearest hospital. A doctor named Pam, a nurse named Graham, and a talking cat named Sam performed experimental surgery on me for 2 hours. It was no use, though. I was brain dead. Pam called my father, who told her he couldn't care less about what happened to me. Graham called my mother, whose response he wasn't able to interpret. Sam didn't call anyone. Those were my only emergency contacts, and no one was coming. The trio pulled the plug on me and let me pass away gently into the misty night sky. Flora McFauna, legally, was declared dead. I can't tell you rightfully that I have any secret knowledge of the afterlife, how it works, or what it means. I will say this, though. Even though I couldn't see or feel anything, I knew that I was still existent. I was still in control. Of course, what is control if you can't fathom or understand it? If existence didn't presently exist, at least to me anyway, then how was I meant to interpret what to do, what to think, how to act. Images began to flash somewhere in me like old memories. I always claimed to be really cool, but at this moment I felt really uncool. It was like every shred of positivity that I positively posited itself, opposed and paused for a prolonged period before privately piercing into me in prearranged patterns. For a moment, I saw my child home in Ventil, Arizona. I saw my father, Sickly, and my mother, Crumb, even my childhood dog, Leslie. It's funny, I never talk about that dog to anyone. I played with Leslie every single day. She was perhaps the only constant good thing I had growing up. When I was 8, my dad shot and killed her. He didn't mean to do it. He thought she was a deer. Still, I missed my best friend, and I couldn't bear being around someone who would hurt me like that. I could feel pulsating all around this dreamscape, this hell I found myself in. The memories became a little darker, and I felt myself slowly reliving my near-fatal fall when I was 16. The weight of the concrete below shattered through my body in waves of searing pain. I could feel a bit of sweat on my forehead, even though at the time I couldn't feel my forehead. I remembered a time when I was 6 and I told my father I was leaving home. Walked down the street 4 or 5 minutes and found myself overlooking a large empty field. I was too scared of the world around me to take a step further. I looked up at least to appreciate the stars, but the sky was totally black. It was an endless void and I was stuck in it, and when I looked at that black void, I felt myself as I am now, in limbo, dancing between heaven and hell. That moment, I felt the total weight of the world on me for the first time. There was so much. I was so little. I wouldn't be able to do everything. I may not be able to do anything. And I felt that weight tenfold when I was lying in the wreckage, looking at a similarly empty night sky. It was like it was empty just for me, like I was looking up at outer space and all the stars flew away to avoid me. I was sensing sweat moving downward a little bit, even though I couldn't feel my body. I couldn't actually tell what I was feeling anymore. I was so limitless, yet tethered to my own interior. I thought about that large field and how every day, since I would compensate that fear of the world by using the world as a mere backdrop for my constant misadventures, I made the world a complete joke, because if it wasn't, I wouldn't be able to handle it. And every single day, I would approach the world like it was lucky to have me. But every now and then, the mask would slip up a little bit, and I'd feel that weight on my shoulders again. It was hard to believe it was all me. The same person who couldn't walk 5 minutes from her home now really had no home. More sweat was forming, but I couldn't understand its purpose. What good is sweat in the afterlife? What purpose did it serve other than to act as a means for making my discomfort worse? Maybe that's all it was there for. If that's the case, then I completely deserve it. I thought about how Brunwick for a moment and how I'd let him down. Our journey was only beginning. We hardly gotten anything done at all before I botched it. I botched everything. I got to thinking, has there ever been anything in my life that I haven't ruined? Then my retrospective began to gain some perspective. I never accomplished anything as a child. My proudest achievements were the ones when causing havoc or ruining something that wasn't mine to ruin. Everything from then to now was a small point in a line that starts with my birth and ends with my death. Everything in between, as I saw it then, was a series of mistakes. I realized that I only destroyed. I never built. Well, though occasionally I would destroy. I screwed everything up. Everything. I was only just getting to know Brunswick, only just starting to do something decent in my life with the Philharmonic, and I threw it all away. On top of all that, I probably killed Brunswick. He probably died in that helicopter crash, all because of me and my screw-ups. By treating the world as one big joke, I was removing myself from the confines of reality and pretending like I was a mythological figure. Nothing I did had consequences because I was so smart and cool. The truth is, I was insecure, selfish, and mentally hideous person who couldn't stand the thought of who she really was, so she turned herself into something else. And now, Brunswick is dead. I decided to stop fighting. Stop pushing. I didn't want to survive this anymore. I wanted to go. Then a bead of sweat hit the ground. As soon as I heard it, my eyes shot open. I was attached to what looked like 100 wires, so I pulled them all out. For a moment, I didn't know where I was. I saw this big window to my right, a few empty chairs, a TV that wasn't on, and a tray with nothing on it. My mind stopped racing, and I tried to calm myself down once I realized where I was. There was a panic button on the bed, so I pushed it like 1,000 times. Pam and Graham, don't know where Sam went, ran into my room within seconds. They explained that my body had been found in some wreckage, yada, yada, yada. They told me some of my ribs were broken, yada, yada, yada. My lungs had been punctured, yada, yada, yada. And that for a little while I was dead. I told them, hey, you can't kill Flora McFauna, baby. I can't be killed like a mortal man because I'm naturally much cooler than the average human. I gave them finger guns and tried my hardest to smile, but as soon as they left, I started crying. I cried for almost an hour without giving myself a break, without even letting myself take a moment to breathe or think, what was wrong with me? Why was I allowed to keep living after what I had done? What was going on in the afterlife that I didn't understand? The only sense I could make was simply that just as the stars avoided me, so too did the afterlife by rejecting me. I came in and was pushed back out. I wasn't ready yet. They didn't want me. Now I'm back on Earth. Who's thinking the same thing? I wiped my tears with the hospital gown I was in, and I let myself take some deep breaths. A bag of my belongings was beside the bed, so I rummaged through it for a minute, found my phone, and immediately called Brunswick. No reply. I called Fungler for a minute, but he pretty much just yelled at me for leaving him with Fuzzbucket. I looked through my contacts to tell all my friends about what happened and realized that the only numbers in my phone were Fungler's, Brunswick's, Pippo's, and a spam risk number. I put my phone away and looked around a little bit at the empty room, really trying to understand how I had entered my 20s without really having any friends. That made it sting all the more that Brunswick's possible death would be all my fault. I looked out the window to my right and saw the long, winding New Mexico landscape before looking at the empty room again. Maybe I'm not so cool after all. I never thought of that. That night, I was sitting at a train station near the hospital waiting to board the train to Arizona. Without my helicopter, I can't really help Fungler. Without Brunswick, I can't really enjoy it anyway. And without a house, I don't really have anywhere else to stay. The doctors advised me not to leave the hospital and to stay under their advisement for a few more weeks, but I busted out the window and took a walk. I can't stay in a place like that. I went to the crash site and I looked through some of the wreckage, but I couldn't find anything. Weirdly enough, I did find the conch, but felt too guilty to take it with me. I left it all behind. I had to go back home to my mother and father and spend some time understanding myself. I spent the entire train ride thinking of the images and memories that flashed before me during my death. I thought specifically about Leslie. She was a huge St. Bernard that would always sleep in my bed and let me use her pillow. The sick truth of her being my best friend and being best friend with a dog all it really takes is to be caring. I fed her, walked her, pet her, play with her. That was all it took. With people, it's much harder because so much of human relationships is interaction and understanding. With understanding, of course, comes misunderstanding, and with misunderstanding comes anxiety, depression, arguments, and resentment. I was never any good at making friends because I was never any good at understanding how to represent myself. I spent too much time trying to figure out who I was instead of just letting it happen. I couldn't just be myself because I didn't think who I was good enough. So slowly I developed this character. I made the world a joke, and in turn made myself a joke. And these were the kinds of jokes where after you tell it, when no one laughs, you feel like you just shouldn't have said anything. When I arrived in Ventil, I woke up to the old farm and set my bag down on the porch. I felt uneasy and unwilling to return to my old life, but I had nothing anymore. I knocked on the front door, and after a moment, my frail old mother answered. Keep in mind that by this point, half of my red hair had been completely burnt off. I had maybe 50 cuts all over my face and neck. My arm was in a sling, and I had gauze all over my midsection. I don't think she even recognized me for a minute. She did end up giving me a big hug and welcoming me inside. I told her what happened and how I was dead, but of course she already knew, and I wish I could understand my mother better because she seems like a pretty nice old lady. It's unfortunate, though, that a moment like this had to be interrupted. My father entered through the back door holding 2 dead rabbits in his hand. He put his gun up on the wall and eyed me for a minute before walking right past me. He walked into the bathroom, and I heard the sink turn on for a minute, then back off, and he exited the bathroom with his face slightly wet. "So what, you're looking for money?" my father asked. No, I began. "Good," he interrupted, "because we ain't got none. Let me guess, then, after your little accident, you're hoping to bum off old Mom and Pop for a few weeks, is that it?" "Well, if it's an imposition," I tried to continue. "Nah, no imposition," he interrupted again. "Just kind of funny to see you in a rut." I looked at my mother, but she was off in another world. It had only been 1 minute, and I regretted my decision to return here. There wasn't anything I could do, though. I lost. I deserved this life, and I had to accept it for what it was. I looked back at my father, who was now sitting on the living room couch with the TV on, and I walked to my old room, set my back down, and sighed. That night, I couldn't sleep. I was completely petrified, and my life was constantly flashing before my eyes. Memories I hadn't thought about in years popped up before disappearing forever. I was hearing voices in my head, but they were all so jumbled that I couldn't make out what any of them were saying. I got out of bed to get some water, tiptoeing through the hallway to the kitchen. When I got there, I found my father sitting quietly on the kitchen table. When I opened the fridge, he turned and looked at me. "Oh," he said, "just you." I didn't say anything in return. I just got my water, drank it, and looked at him. He looked so sad, so bored. I looked out the window in front of him and saw, yet again, nothing. This was his entire life, this nothingness. This place that once scared me now appears to me to be too dull. I'd never seen my father look like that, but I never humanized him either. In my head, he was always a tyrant, an awfully mean person, even a monster. Right now, though, he just looked like some sad guy. I walked back down the hallway and peeked into my mother's room, and she was sitting at the edge of her bed, facing away from me, with her head in her hands. Come to think of it, I had never seen her look like that either. I went back into my room and grabbed my bag before walking out the front door and never looking back again. Forget it, I thought. Maybe my childhood was lacking, but my life is exciting, freeing, and hectic. I've seen things no one else had, done things no one else has, and explored many places no one else has. I may have made myself a persona, but who's to say that persona isn't a real manifestation of myself as anything else? And I don't have any friends? So what? I'll make friends while I spend my life living. And if I don't, who cares? If I die completely alone and no one cares that I'm gone, at least I gave myself a fighting chance. I'm just beginning to live. What? I'm gonna let some near-death experience take down Flora McFauna? No way, no how. I'm an unstoppable machine. I'm a force to be reckoned with. I'm what flies high in the sky. I will not give up like this. But damn, sometimes it's really hard not to want to give up. Chapter 6. Truth Be Sold. Okay, fast forward a month later. I'm doing experimental dance techniques on the side of the road for spare change. By this point, I'm living in a town called Hojo's Grunge Hut. I believe it was called that because at one point in time, the only thing in this town was a bar called Hojo's Grunge Hut. Being that it was in the middle of nowhere, it was such an irregular sight that people passing through the desert simply had to stop for a drink. I've heard of regulars, but irregulars? Anyway, they built a town around it. You could have got there on your own. I don't need to explain everything to you. Get off my back, man. I had finally made enough quarters to call Fungler from the phone booth outside the bar. Weirdly enough, it was a different bar. Hojo's Grunge Hut, by this time, was the town hall. Fuzzbucket picked up the phone. Apparently Fungler and Fuzzbucket are great friends now and are also living together in a summer home in Fort Lauderdale. Whatever. I told Fuzzbucket to put Fungler on the horn, and all I could hear was the sound of really loud steel drums in the background being interrupted by a Fungler shriek. "Where have you been?" I ask. He asked. "I've been out of commission," I answered. "Because I continued. "I got in a fatal plane crash, possibly killing Brunswick, and accidentally killing myself in the process." I don't care. Listen, this Fuzzbucket guy is great. He's so much fun. He can appear and disappear anytime. You should see his insides. But that's beside the point. I asked for a Philharmonic, and you got me Fuzzbucket. I yell. He yelled. I need a full orchestra, and I can tell you, lack motivation. So I'm gonna motivate ya. You ready? I looked around, expecting Fungler to airdrop some shit with one of his cool drones. Didn't happen, though. "Yeah," I said. "I got you a place to stay." He got me a place to stay. Right outside this cool exotic island. And what's more, a new helicopter. But you better not crash this one. Where's the place at? It's called the House of Animals. My wounds were healing nicely. I ditched my splint, was wearing way less gauze, and most of my scratches were closing up. By this point, I was sporting a blue Hawaiian button-up, khaki shorts, flip-flops, and lightly sunburnt cheeks. Not to be confused with slightly unheard geeks, who I'll be getting to in a moment. The point is, Flora had to get out of town. This desert just wasn't doing it, buddy. That's when one of Fungler's cool drones flew in. Finally, I thought. It didn't airdrop anything, though. A claw just came out of it and slowly followed me around town. Didn't know it was trying to get my attention. It should have said something. Anyway, I eventually realized what's what, and the claw grabbed me by the back of my britches and picked me up into the air. I felt like I was flying like a cool bird, plus I was mooning the whole town, so I felt like a badass. The drone carried me out of the town, then out of the state, then out of the country, then in the ocean. I could see Rare Groove from up here. It was unmistakable, but in this case, I was mistaking it for something else, which was the House of Animals. Of course, Fungler had to be a dick at all hours of the day, so his drone didn't actually take me to the House of Animals, but instead to the backwoods airport on a separate island just behind it. I've been advised by my legal team not to name the islands, but it rhymed with Muhu Satoya. The airport was nice for a dumbass airport. It had a cool helicopter and even a nice jet. I gandered around at all the nifty stuff lying around, like this massive box of Lego. I sat there for like an hour building a really cool Lego castle. Inside it, I put a little Lego version of myself because I'm a narcissist, and a little white block next to me to represent Brunswick because I'm a sentimentalist. I thought about putting a tiny stupid looking block to represent Fungler, but didn't because I'm a minimalist. I got a phone call from the Fung man, interrupting my Lego trance. He got me a flip phone too. "How's it going, Dr. Fung?" I asked. "Listen, Flora, no time to get acquainted with the new territory," Fungler said quickly. "2 guys are coming your way, and you've got to fly them to Rare Groove. They have to do important campaign stuff, no questions asked. Fungler out." And just like that, Fungler was out. I looked around, and just behind me were 2 fellas on top of some luggage paddling at full speed through the ocean. They were taking forever to get to me, though, because they were terrible swimmers. I started pacing back and forth. At one point, I let out an audible yawn, and that got their attention. Sometimes I have to wonder why I never tried to get a teaching degree, but I guess that's what we got lawyers for, eh, kids? I asked them when they finally arrived. These boys were idiots, pure and simple. I could tell just by looking at them. Was it God that brought us to this plane, and am I his greatest disciple? One of them asked, annoyingly. I really didn't give a shit about what he was talking about, so I shrugged it off with a very basic and unassuming response. If I knew any more about what it is that God intends, I began, I'd be doing a few steps closer to a nursing home's management chair and a few steps further from being a great value Sully. Nevertheless, you have raised an interesting question about predestination, and I'm not one to disregard the sort of high concept, page-turning dialogue. Keeping this in mind, I have to simply restate the obvious. I know as much about the outcome of our world's constant domino effect as you do. We are on this world to fulfill some sort of role, although it is hard to know what that role is outright. Maybe it's to be the best damn autopilot this side of the Mississippi. Maybe it's to start a chart-topping novelty band. Hell, maybe your destiny is waiting for you on Rare Groove, which is our destination this evening. If you could keep your hands inside the airplane at all times, I won't have to hurt you physically. But if I'm being honest, if one of you two were to fall out of the plane, I really wouldn't mind. Within an hour, we were nearing Rare Groove. I'm a really fast and frequent flyer. Only problem is I've never flown this kind of jet before. I'm not even sure if I've ever flown a jet before. Can someone reread the first few chapters to see if I've ever mentioned flying a jet before? Okay, until it corrected, I'm gonna say I've never flown a jet before. So yeah, I crashed it into the island immediately. I'm awesome though, so no one was injured. Actually, that's not true. There was a stewardess on there and she died instantly, but I forgot her name, and the next few days were kind of a blur, so I don't even remember killing her. The 2 boys, whom I know now as soundasses Grant and Eric, they talked a lot on the plane, and as a side note, who cares enough about Huey Lewis and the news to talk exclusively about them for an entire plane ride? So weird. Threw $5 at me and walked purposefully off the plane. I didn't really know what was going on or why I was flying them to Rare Groove, but I didn't really care that much at this point. I noticed them immediately, however, that things were different than the other times I visited the Isle. For starters, it didn't look like complete shit. It was clear that they had cleaned it up for some kind of campaign, but again, I wasn't there all the time at the time. The first thing I remember is Grant firing his gun in the air, and I decided it was best for me to hide behind the plane and pretend like I was fixing it. There was some kind of argument between the two and a man named Lincoln Bio, but it didn't seem like any more gunplay would be involved, so I relaxed a little bit before Eric asked me, Where do you think you can get that thing running again? I told him it would take 2 weeks and even went on a long tirade about how I don't think I'll be able to find the right kind of parts in this dead-end town, but I could tell he wasn't listening. Holy shit!
It was creative!
Oh, I have to start over now!
No, you...
As I was saying, I told him it would take 2 weeks and even went on a long tirade about how I don't think I'll be able to find the right kind of parts in this dead-end town. But I could tell he wasn't listening. He eventually turned back around while I was mid-sentence and kept talking to that other guy. Then they all just walked off and I was stuck in an empty-ass Rare Groove town square, so I just fixed up the plane for a little while, doing what I can. I mean, I'm good at planes, but I'm not a plane wizard. I have shot lightning out of my fingertips before, though, but it was a fluke. I've tried to recreate it several times, but I end up just shooting fireballs instead, and I don't even drink. Anyway, it was around this time that I saw dark clouds forming in the sky, and this weird part man, part crab creature named Rashuro Jackson descended from the heavens and onto Rare Groove. At first, he wandered around aimlessly. Then he saw me, and he started to sprint. He jumped on top of the plane, looking down on me like a king. Flora McFauna! He spoke in a surprisingly normal voice. Got some mail for you. Oh, he's a courier, I thought to myself. He reached his hand out, so I tried to grab the mail from his claws and realized there was none. He didn't have any fucking mail. You don't have any fucking mail, I said. No, I don't, and you're never gonna get mail again if you don't quit snooping around where you don't belong, he fired back. He then hit me with one of his claws. Ow, what the hell are you talking about? Snooping around what? I yelped back like someone who had just been smacked with a claw. Don't play dumb, McFauna, he screamed like a dumbass. Wait, are you saying you're gonna kill me if I don't stop snooping around and that's why I won't get mail anymore? Or are you just gonna make it to where I never get mail in general? Because dead people still get mail. Enough! He yelled, cutting me off. What I meant by the threat was that you'll never get mail ever again. Oh, that's actually great. I hate mail. Bills, bills, and bills as far as I'm concerned. He hesitated for a bit, then he spoke assertively. I guess you can say goodbye to Reader's Digest then. No shit, he's right. Oh shit, you're right, I said. He then giggled like a demented preschooler and floated away into the clouds. The dark clouds became light again, then parted. Well, I guess someone isn't a fan of my wacky happenings. But why? I was really confused, and now that the conversation was over, I remembered that I was stuck on Rare Groove, which sucks. So I pulled out my wrench and got a wrench in. The next day, I went to a department store with one of the two sound-ass boys, can't remember which, and we bought a bunch of crap with some guy's company card. I assumed at first that they stole it until I met Klein, but that's later down the line. Later down the Klein? Write that down. I did see these deer statues that I thought were real deer, so I tried to wrangle and eat them in the store, but ended up with a mouthful of plastic. We bought them anyway because I had a suspicion that they were probably still alive. Like, maybe they were living deer, and they upset a magic prince who turned them into plastic statues. If that were the case, all I'd have to do is wait for the spell to wear off, and I'd get a free meal. Hashtag life hack, bitches. Okay. Apparently, they were trying to organize some big campaign jamboree for a goat-like creature named Griffley who was fighting for re-election on the island. Here's the part where they fucked me over. So basically, Grant and Eric set this whole thing up for Griffley's speech. Then when it was finally time for the speech, they bailed. So I had to sit through Griffley's whole thing. He can't even talk. You just have to interpret his movements. I really hated it, and it was like 4 hours long. Free churros, though. Pretty cool. Maybe politics ain't so bad. Bottom line for that evening, while I was sitting watching this long speech, the Soundass boys had apparently murdered the wife of the opposition by walling in all the windows and doors of her bedroom. I don't think it was cool, but I respected it as a genuine political strategy. After eating the churros, I got sort of into politics. The strategy backfired, however, because instead of thinking that the opposition murdered his wife, they just saw him in a more sympathetic light, and his following was stronger than ever before. Guess I don't know anything about politics. Go figure. It was around this time that I received a weird piece of mail from Rashuro Jackson. This was actually how I knew that his name was Rashuro Jackson, because he never said it the first time I met him. His letter read, "Dear Flora, I hope this letter finds you well. This is Rashuro Jackson speaking. I'd like to formally apologize for my behavior the other day when I threatened to take away your mail. I don't want to do that to you, because mail is very important. That being said, if you don't quit snooping around where you don't belong, I'll claw your eyes out. Yours always, Rashuro Jackson." I was no closer to understanding what exactly he was talking about, who exactly he was, and what exactly is going on, but his penmanship was divine. For a guy with 2 giant claws, he had flawless handwriting. I snapped a few pictures of the letter with my phone so that I could try to replicate his style later. Then I threw the letter in the trash. I don't know if I mentioned it yet, but the opposition to the talking goat creature was a living egg. That's the kind of messed up stuff that happens on Rare Groove. And while I'm on the subject, I felt like I was slowly losing my marbles during my stay on Rare Groove, and I didn't get a wink of sleep the entire time I was there. So take that into account when I tell you what happens next. We ate a bunch of eggs. Tiny eggs. They were related to the opposition somehow, and Soundass said to eat the eggs, so I ate the eggs. I didn't realize these particular eggs were living, breathing, talking creatures, but fuck it, I ate them anyway. I was really into politics, and that just seemed like the right call. They didn't sit well, though, and I was running to the bathroom once every half hour for the upcoming month afterward. After we killed the opposition's entire family, the Soundass boys burned him alive on stage so their goat friend could continue to be the mayor. The night beforehand, I had called in a favor with old Uncle Pippo, who airlifted in the parts I needed to fix the jet. Once it was fixed, I got the fuck out of there. Long story short, I was totally justified in everything I did that week. And if you need to prosecute anyone for the murders, call up Soundass, because I had nothing to do with anything. Everything I did, so I've assumed, falls completely under the blanket of political strategy, and when you're in the politics game, the law is nothing but a suggestion. I'm tired of talking about this shit. Chapter 7. A bold strategy. 2 days later, and I'm at the peak of a great volcano known only as Father Jimbo, throwing a sacred amulet into the fiery depths below. Yeah, things move pretty fast when you're me. And I'm me. You're lucky to even be within my pages right now. So I got the amulet from a guy named Juddy who paid me $50 to throw it into a volcano. Here's the catch. Big lizard. Yup. There was a giant lizard in the volcano that hated jewelry. And what's more, he hated aviation. I also suspect that he hated redheads, but I haven't been able to prove that in a court of law. Nonetheless, he hated that I was throwing an amulet right at his weird little head. He opened his mouth and caught the amulet, then shot it out of his mouth like a bullet straight at my fucking forehead, which hurt really bad. That hurt really bad, you stupid lizard! I yelled at the big lizard. He just growled in response, which I interpreted as an apology at the time, but as I've said, I'm really not good at interpreting non-speech, so I'm pretty sure he was probably doing the opposite. And what is the opposite of an apology, you ask? First of all, I'm not taking questions. This is a book, not a one-on-one interview, Larry King. Second of all, Larry King is dead. Get over it. Third of all, a diss rap. That's right. The lizard was writing an anti-Flora diss track, and it was mere moments before it would debut on the charts. Within the week, it would reach number 1. Within the month, it would become certified gold, and it was also certified bold of that big-ass lizard to start a music career just to piss me off. Here's something else that pissed me off. I was playing in a 4-piece band at this time for some side money. We had to put out 3 records and didn't chart a single time. And this stupid lizard puts 1 disc track out, and suddenly people treat him like he's a prince. And what's more, he was a prince. It turned out Prince didn't actually die, but fell out of a plane into a volcano and fused with the toxins found at the volcano's core, turning him into a giant dinosaur. Obviously, this is why it charted so well. It was a comeback Prince song. But still, you would think a Prince foray into diss hip-hop would be enough to sway people from buying it on iTunes, especially not a physical copy. I mean, did someone out there actually buy a 7-inch single of a dinosaur lizard Prince dissing a no-name aviatrix? I'd like them to meet the person who did, so I can punch them in the mouth. Prince's flow was so weak, too. I honestly wish Larry King had fallen into that volcano and become a giant lizard. A diss from him would have been so cool and awesome, but he's dead. Just get over it. The band I played in was called Flora McFauna's House of Funk. I was obviously on bass guitar with my good friends Bebop and Rocksteady playing guitar and drums, respectively. I had a guy playing synth named Loud Mongo who was covered in medical gauze all the time. There was also a superhero cleaning up the streets named Mr. Flutterby, and I've never seen him and Loud Mongo in the same room together. I'm not saying they're the same guy. I'm just saying it really makes me go, Anyway, we bang out a bunch of loud funk classics mixed with originals, and we always make at least $20 from admission. All I'm saying is, even though Prince moved into a volcano, he's still probably pretty loaded, right? Throw a dog a bone. I'm broke. Additionally, I can play circles around Prince. So, there I was, confronted by Lizard Prince. He just dissed me to high heaven, and I'm just sitting there trying to decide whether I should yawn or give him a standing O, just out of musician's honor. I have been known to be extremely honorable in the past. This is one of those times where I mutter honor schmonner under my breath and forgo any part of me that wants to be a good fellow. No. I continue to mutter, Lizard Prince is going down. I left the volcano and returned to the village that sits beside it. I believe it was called Port Booty. As soon as I arrived, I started chopping down trees, and I mean trees from everywhere, from town square, from people's yards, from the nature conservatory. I deforested the hell out of Port Booty and started constructing a catapult so that I could attack Lizard Prince and maybe kill him again. After a few hours of this, the townspeople got really frustrated and held an intervention for me. Some of them were concerned that my deforestation of the town was dangerous to its ecosystem. I told them to shut their goofy little mouths because I had a lizard to catapult. And sure enough, once they all shut up, I was able to finish construction on my masterpiece. It was perhaps the biggest catapult that has ever been built. I wish I had called it Guinness, the brewing company, so I can get wasted while I accept my Ripley's Believe It or Not award for biggest catapult. After I felt it was at its final form, I strapped on my cool aviatrix hat that I started wearing a week earlier, sat down in the catapult, and flung myself straight at the volcano. I went right into the eye of the volcano, and as soon as I started plummeting toward the depths, Lizard Prince's dumb head reared into view. He opened his mouth, and in shock, bingo, I went right down the bastard's throat. It is from within that I can do the most damage, I thought out loud. I went all the way down to Lizard Prince's ass, smacking psh, 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 every organ and cavity on the way down. I was playing his insides like a piano, tickling the ivories of the great lizard's anatomy. But soon, as I've said, I ended up at his ass. And just like any ass, this one belonged to one pissed off lizard. He started shaking his ass around so fervently that I felt like I was on a bucking bronco, except I was inside the bronco, and instead of it bucking, it's just shaking its ass around fervently. "Quit shaking your ass, you no-talent hack," I said calmly to the lizard. This just pissed him off more, though, because he started wagging his booty with 10 times more ferocity. After bouncing from one side of his ass to the other about 100 times, he stopped and fell over. It got really quiet for a minute. Then I heard this light tapping. I closed my eyes for a second so I could really hear what the sound was. And after a few more taps, though, it got completely silent again. Then, once everything was quiet as can be, I heard the sound of a powerful laser as it pierced Lizard Prince's flesh, and in flew Brunwick. When the helicopter crashed, Brunwick began, I was like, ooh-wee, what the hell is going on here? Know what I'm saying? Then kablooey, know what I mean? The helicopter blows up and I'm thinking, I'm toast, right? Well, that's when that little earring thing you told me to put inside of myself started glowing like a freaking bag of Doritos. Okay, babe? "The conch!" I yelled impenetrably, interrupting Brunwick. "Sorry, but you're talking about the conch. Also, do Doritos glow?" "They do when you're this guy toots, but that's enough said on that. So this conch thing you're talking about, it glows like a freaking light bulb, eh? And then all of a sudden I got sucked into this tiny little earring, and that's when I met her. The Great One." "The Great One? You mean God? Did you meet God inside of the tiny earring?" I asked Brunwick. "Yeah, I think so. She was really funny and old, and she kept insulting me," he said in reply. Oh, he's talking about Joan Rivers, I thought. "Oh, you're talking about Joan Rivers," I said. "Yeah, that's right. She told me that she stopped you from dying and that it was super important that I get back to you and finish assembling the Philharmonic." Brunwick fluttered up and around a bit, making sure no one was around. "I think it could be a life or death type thing, like save the world type deal. I know what time and I'm beb." Well, we were sitting at the top of the volcano. Brunwick had pulled me out of Lizard Prince and dropped me here so we could discuss the past and also the future. The stuff he was telling me had crazy implications regarding life and death. For starters, Joan Rivers died 4 years ago? Just checked, it was actually 7 years ago. Either way, who gave her the power to reverse death? Can anybody do that after they die? Does it have something to do with being stuck in the conch? How did she get in the conch? Is she actually dead or just stuck in there trying to break free? If so, how can she dispensate life and death? Like, what the hell is going on? Another really weird thing happened while you were gone. When I was on Rare Groove murdering an egg politician, this weird half-man, half-crab creature descended from the heavens and vaguely threatened me. How'd he vaguely threaten ya? Brunwick questioned. Well, he told me to quit sticking my nose where it doesn't belong or I never get mail again, I reply. Sounds like a good thing to me. That's what I said, is what I said to Brunwick, that is. Well, it looks like we ain't saving the world unopposed, eh, Flora? Brunwick said justifiably. Just hearing his weird voice say my name was bringing me real happy type beats. I'm glad I didn't kill Brunwick. Sure seems like it, I say to Brunwick. I think the first thing we need to do is... I start saying before being distracted by the scent of fire and brimstone. What the hell is that smell? Brunwick fluttered up a little bit to peek down the volcano's base. Uh-oh, he said, as I turned to look at what he was seeing. I got pelted in the forehead with a big-ass rock. Ow, fuck! I yelled indeterminately. Every townsperson from Port Booty was marching up the volcano to get their revenge on us for deforesting their town and killing lizard prince. I looked into this when I got home later, and it turns out that Lizard Prince was actually a huge tourist attraction for them, so I probably bankrupted the town. Oh well, sucks for them. I was too busy saving the world. I love being able to use that excuse now. Long story short, I threw Brunwick and he gave every single townsperson paper cuts in between all their fingers and toes, which sucks. I didn't even tell him to do that. Honestly, when I threw him at the townspeople, I was half expecting him to slit everyone's throats like he did to the Foreshadow brothers. I mean, I'm glad he didn't do that, I guess, but that would have been classic Brunwick. Instead, he just fucking sliced all their hands and feet open. Right in the middle of their fingers and toes, too. That just really sucks. I'm overemphasizing it because I think about it all the time. Like, it was grisly. It was really cool, though, and underrated. I don't want to get into why it was so cool and underrated because I know you won't get it. We're over 70 pages in, and I feel like you still don't get my quirky sense of humor. Picture me rolling my eyes. That's what I'm doing right now as I type this. This is a tell-all, not a meatball. You'll get that one when you're older. All the townsfolk fell to the ground, moaning and crying. It was so cool and awesome to see all the townsfolk do that on account of their paper cuts. Me and Brunwick booked it to my helicopter and we got the hell out of Dodge. We had bigger fish to fry. Chapter 8. Fish to Fry. So this next chapter takes place almost entirely at a Fish concert, and I can explain why. For starters, I needed Fish to join the Fungler Philharmonic. I just knew they would make excellent additions to the fine ensemble we had already assembled, which at the moment was just Fuzzbucket. God, I almost forgot about Fuzzbucket. He's really creepy and hairy and gross. Second of all, I crash-landed the helicopter on top of the Hollywood Bowl, and I soared right into the crowd like a majestic bird that had just got shocked by electricity and died. I didn't die, though. I just smelled funny. Lastly, I really had to pee, and I figured the Hollywood Bowl had a bathroom, though I'd never seen it. Sheesh, lady, for a superstar aviatrix, you sure do crash a lot of helicopters. Zing! Brunwick said, berating me on my admittedly bad history with crashing expensive air vessels. Right off the bat, I could tell something was off. Takes a keen eye, but I knew that things weren't quite right for two very specific reasons. The first of which was simple. The crowd was cheering. For Fish? That doesn't make any sense. And secondly, why the fuck was Fish playing the Hollywood Bowl? I mean, it was packed. For Fish. That just doesn't make sense. I declared that fish had to be cool intergalactic mind probers or something, because otherwise this cannot be explained. Fungler packed the helicopter with his cool wingsuit and jet rocket boots, so I popped those on and flew to the stage, where I was confronted by the sloppy musicianship of Fish. I know they aren't the best band ever, but Fungler needed some musicians, and they are arguably that. Additionally, as I've said, I really needed to pee, and Fish just happened to be at the Hollywood Bowl, so it just makes sense from a business standpoint. Oh, by the way, I'm really into business now. Listen, boys, I'm calling a friend to come fix this here air vessel, I said to Fish really comfortably and cool-like. Once it's fixed, you jerks better get in one by one so I can take you to the Fungus King. Understood? Please, I have a family, yelled one of the members of Fish. I don't know which one, I can't tell them apart. Kiss them goodbye, I said like a creep. Then I slowly walked away, then turned around for a split second to clarify. At least until the Fungler Philharmonic performs its first symphony. I think they knew what I meant. I opened up my flip phone and dialed the 7 sacred keys that summoned Uncle Pippo. You know, before writing this tell-all memoir, I thought I had only met and/or called for Pippo's assistance once or twice, but I'm realizing now that I actually do it a lot. So what? What else is he good for? He's probably a friggin' serial killer, for Christ's sakes. At least I don't pay him. Well, I did pay him this time, but that was because he needed a ticket to the Hollywood Bowl. I also bought him a t-shirt at the merch booth. He got a hot dog too, but he paid for that with his own money. Well, it was the money I paid him for fixing the helicopter, which he did by the time it took me to explain how I paid him in this paragraph. Hop in, mutts, I said to Fish. You don't have to do this, the lead singer, Trey Oratorio, yelled to Brunwick, who was playing Flappy Bird on his iPhone. Wow, that dates this story. LOL. Okay. Once Fish was all loaded up, I hopped in with Brunwick and we took off for Rare Groove. I'm pretty sure I just left Pippo there, so that's payment enough. Free trip to Hollywood. He did pay for the trip, though. By the time I reached Rare Groove, the members of Fish had shit themselves, pissed themselves, found and denounced God, and also wrote a whole album about the experience. Honestly, it sounded pretty good. It'll probably be their best and most mature album yet. Not gonna happen anytime soon, though. They gotta please the Fung Man first. Fish descended from the heavens, and I was the hand that delivered them unto the Fungler. As soon as the helicopter hit the ground, I felt like I accomplished a Herculean feat. Then I got pelted in the head with a rock again. Ow! Why do people keep throwing rocks at me? I yelled in disbelief. I looked over to see who the frick threw the frickin' rock, and of course, it was that snide bastard the members of Soundass were talking to earlier, link in bio. He had this real condescending look on his face, as if I murdered his kids right in front of him or something. But I didn't. He doesn't even have kids. But I did kill all those egg creatures less than a week ago. It wasn't in front of him, though, and I hadn't been explicitly implicated in the crime yet. So he's just being dramatic, if you ask me. What you did was uncalled for, he said, pelting another rock at me. Selfish! He threw another. Foolish! And another. Goofy! He yelled, shaking his entire island with the sheer power of his voice. By now, he bruised my shin, my shoulder, and my forehead. So he's toast. Listen, buddy, I said, even though he wasn't really my buddy. You pelt one more rock at me, and I'm gonna rip your skin off and put it back on upside down. He just snarled and turned around to walk away. As he did, I kicked his little rear end. I'll take shit from Fish, but not that guy. The rest of the town seemed good, though. It seems that even though I can't tell what Griffley is or what he's saying, he makes a real difference here. I'm not trying to justify my actions or anything, but just remember that when the relevant court date for the egg murders come up. Fungler hopped over to me merry as can be that I brought someone else for his Philharmonic. "Miss Fauna," he yelled, "would these be more ready and willing participants for my Philharmonic?" "It's McFauna," I said, because I'm not taking shit from a guy named Fungler. "And yes, this is the band Fish." "Woo! I love a sellout," he exclaimed. "That's real big fish. This is just fish. Real lame fish," I replied. Then gave Brunwick a fist bump. LOL. "Ah," Fungler replied in disappointment. "Well, good enough for me. Come along now, boys," he said as he guided the 4 members of Fish, who by now were handcuffed to each other and unable to speak on account of duct tape over their mouths, with him to his Fungler Philharmonic practice room. As soon as they were out of sight and out of mind, I got struck by a fucking lightning. So by now, I have 3 bruises. I'm still recovering from the near-fatal injuries I got only a couple weeks prior, and now I'm fried. As I lied on the ground, I saw the clouds parting above me, and sure enough, that crab bastard, Roshiro Jackson, descended once more. "What the hell do you want this time, Jackson?" I asked, still writhing in pain from the lightning strike. "Nothing much, Miss McFlora," he replied like a jackass. "Just reminding you to quit sticking your nose where it don't belong." "Okay," I said, still in audible pain. "First of all, it's Flora McFauna. I'll take shit from Fish, but not someone named Roshiro Jackson. And second of all, where exactly does my nose belong?" "I don't know. I don't have a nose," he said, but it was bullshit. He totally had a nose and I could see it. "But you better quit assembling the Philharmonic. There's a lot to Fungler that you don't know about, and I can assure you that if the Fungler Philharmonic performs, you can kiss your mail goodbye." "Again, I don't like getting mail to begin with," I said. "Yeah, who needs mail?" said Brunwick, which was ironic since he was an envelope. "Okay," Roshiro continued, "then I'll just have to kill you both." "There it is," I said. I knew he didn't mean he was going to stop me from getting mail. That's too good to be true. "Stay away from Fungler and quit assembling the Philharmonic," he warned. Then he turned around and farted so hard that he flew back into the heavens. I wonder why he didn't do that the first time I saw him. There's no way I missed that. Like, he farted really loud and shot off like a freaking rocket. So cool. "What's that guy's deal?" Brunwick asked in the cloud of green dust left behind from Roshiro's fart. "I don't know, but you know what this means," I replied. "I mean, you know what this means?" Sorry, I'm thinking of beans because of the fart. Jeez, that was a really crazy fart. Good grief. Anyway, you know what this means? I continued as I put on aviators. It means we're on to something. Chapter 9. Disregarding Time. Me and Brunwick were headed to New York because I had a really important gig with FMHOF, Flora McFauna's House of Funk. Later that evening, we decided on the way that Brunwick will attempt to play bongos for the band, and if it doesn't end up working, then he can just be the hype man. Brunwick seemed like he was more excited to be the hype man than anything, so who knows how hard he'll try at the bongos. God bless his lazy heart. We got there a little early, and like always, I had good reason for that. See, I had the entire day mapped out. First things first, I have to meet with a scientist who's illegally selling me a laser blaster. I know. Why didn't I get a laser blaster sooner? Well, I'll tell you what, I honestly didn't think I needed it until I got pelted with rocks by multiple different people over the course of 2 days. Yeah, the laser blaster was a no-brainer. Secondly, I'm gonna hand out flyers while I'm in New York so I can wrangle up literally anybody to be in Fungler's Philharmonic. Are there any musicians in New York? I don't know. Maybe a few. I'll take what I can get. Thirdly, I gotta play my gig. Then lastly, I gotta force Bebop, Rocksteady, and Loud Mongo to join the Philharmonic too. It may be a bit too funky for classical music, but I think they'll end up to the challenge. If not, Bebop can just be the hype man and Rocksteady can perform crank phone calls on stage. Yes, a 4-point plan. Very business-oriented of me. Being really into business is a good look. On me. Anyway, I had no idea what I was getting into meeting with this weirdo scientist. For starters, he introduced himself to me on the phone as Lord K. I was just thinking, yeah, big whoop. Anybody can be a lord if you got $50 lying around. Hell, I'm a lord. But y'all ain't ready to talk about that yet. The only thing I knew about the guy was that mysterious name. That he was some kind of genius and that he apparently knows Bebop and Rocksteady really well. That's the only reason I found out about him in the first place. They referred me to him. Just like much of my life, though, this ended up being an interconnected nightmare. He told me to meet him in Central Park, so I did. After waiting for like a half hour, I was about to leave before the ground started to rumble beneath me. All of a sudden, this giant drill vehicle came out of the ground and inside it walked someone completely unmistakable. Although I initially mistook it for something else, which was a giant pink man. No, it was actually a giant pink robot housing someone who I've come to know as Klein Detterman. His weird little face was displayed on a screen on the robot's stomach. "McFauna," he snarled, "come with me." I don't know why, but I was pretty much just like, yup, and climbed aboard. I mean, how often do you get to ride inside a giant drill? This was only my 4th time, but y'all ain't ready to talk about that yet. He took me deep into the Earth's core, where we were greeted by a giant silver spaceship doohickey. Outside of it was a wooden sign that simply read, "Welcome to the Techodrome," which I thought was really stupid because who the fuck is reading that sign? Only the people who know about it already. I met Klein less than a minute ago and I already can tell he's a dullard. "You'll have to excuse my tardiness, Mrs. McFauna," Klein said to me as we entered the Techodrome's front doors. I was busy watching a soap opera, John and Marcia. It's my favorite show." "Oh yeah, my mom used to watch that one," I replied. "I always liked it. It's so true to life," Klein interrupted. "I like you already, Miss McFauna. Now come here to the gadgety room. This is where you'll find the laser blaster you seek." He guided me into a room filled with all sorts of crazy gadgets. I saw weaponry, failed experiments, some kind of secret ooze, a giant machine in the corner of the room that looked dangerous. "What is all this stuff, Lord K?" I asked intelligibly. "Please call me Klein," he replied. "And, well, back in the day, I had a particular problem with some teenagers, but they've since grown up and gotten office jobs. I hardly ever come down here anymore. Hell, most of this stuff here doesn't even work. Ever since I put my consciousness into a computer, I've had no reason to ever visit the Techodrome. I'm in the candy business now and the music business. You ever heard of Sound Ass?" It sounds funny now, but I had already forgotten Sound Ass existed by this time. "No, I haven't," I said. "Well, they're going to be very, very successful," he replied slowly. "Yes. My benefactors will see to that." He then paused for a second, as though he entered a trance. He drooled a little bit, which was kind of cool, since I've never seen a computer drool before. Anyway, he said quickly, that laser blaster you were looking for is right there next to the time machine. The time machine? I asked, really cool-like. Oh yes, Klein said devilishly. See, I intended to put myself back in my body, well, my old body, and go back in time to stop those pests once and for all. I looked over a little bit and saw this weird freezer with a creepy dead brain creature in it. This was just starting to get a little freaky-deaky, so I was just trying to talk my way out of there. Yeah, so anyway, I started. You and the brain going back to the Wild West? Wild West? Klein asked. My time machine could never handle going that far back. Unless what? I asked as I started sweating. Well, if I could feasibly go back that far, then that means I could. Klein paused for a minute. New plan. You're getting into the time machine. Oh, hell no, you freaking computer virus, I said, kicking Klein's stupid screen. That's when his giant pink robot guy picked me up by the neck. Maybe I should have asked nicely, he said, throwing me into the time machine like I was a freaking ball. You know, because you throw balls. He didn't throw me like a human, he threw me casually, is what I'm saying. More like a ball. I couldn't think of anything better than that. I swear to Fungler I will find you and I will rip your dumbass screen out of that dumbass robot and I'll smash it into a million little... But before I could finish threatening him, I had disintegrated. I awoke in the wily wilderness. I had no idea where I was, but there was dust and cacti everywhere, and I heard freewheeling saloon piano music in the distance. I turned around and saw a rickety old bar surrounded by a whole lot of nothing. In the distance, I thought I could see a town, but it was unclear. Old-timey, why me? Why me? I barked to nobody. I entered the saloon looking about as out of place as a 21st century aviatrix in a 19th century fictionalized Western saloon. Inside, there were a few gruff-looking individuals playing poker and a guy knocked out cold on the floor. Yee-haw! This is most as good as a pig yelling up Sydney's as a hyena carcass, yee-haw! Yelled the voice of a cowboy as he grabbed his earnings at the poker table. He stood up with his bag full of money, and he turned to me. And who might you be, little lady? I didn't even know how to respond to this smelly, ancient man. My name is I stopped myself from continuing. Do I really want to use my real name and mess with this space-time continuum? Damn. Why didn't Klein think about the space-time continuum? I looked over and saw a corkboard with a bunch of random drawings of flowers and horses attached to it. The name's Corkbordo. As soon as the words exited the strange man's mouth, a gunshot rang out in the saloon. I turned around and saw a big guy with a sheriff's badge and a squirrely guy with a tiny piece of construction paper taped to his chest that says deputy. Is that the slimy, vile rodent Buster Crow I see? The sheriff screamed at the top of his lungs. Ah, heck, Rotundi, Buster replied. You can just leave me be. I just won my first game of poker since the first Animal War. What's an Animal War? I asked, but no one answered. I realized now it was probably a weird time to interrupt. Come on, Buster, put your hands up so I don't have to get the belt, said the weaselly Deputy Fortuna. From the distance, I could hear the sound of a badass hog coming full speed. It crashed through the wall, immediately running over and killing a bar patron. On the hog was this guy wearing a leather vest with Van Halen patches and a greaser hat. He looked oily and kind of gross. I actually hated how my day was going so far. I'm gonna have to whoop Bebop and Rocksteady for getting me into this mess. "Is that the Buster Crow I see?" said the Hog Man to the cowboy. "Papa Eddie, wow, you just crashed through a wall and ran over Tombo Leonard." "Yeah," Papa Eddie replied. "I don't care about Tombo. My mind's off Tombo. Hop on, I'll explain on the way." "Sounds good to me," Buster said. "Hey, can I take... What'd you say your name was again?" Cork Bordeaux, I replied with ease. I'm really good at lying under pressure because it's a core tenet in the business world. If I'm telling the truth, though, I'm getting kind of sick of business. It's time to flip the switch over to casual. "Mind if I take Cork Bordeaux?" he asked Papa Eddie. "What? I don't care. Come on, everybody's staring," he answered. The sheriff yelled, the deputy cried, and Buster let out a mighty yeehaw. Before long, we were out of that dank bar and back into the wily wilderness. I gotta be honest, I had never felt so alive. I also felt dead, though. I felt many things. To name one, gassy. Okay. We stopped outside an outhouse where Buster was pissing freely right outside of it. Meanwhile, Eddie explained his urgent situation to us, and Buster pretended like he was listening. "So here's the situation," Eddie began. "Yeah, I'm listening," Buster said, still pissing. He must have drank a lot. I mean, it was really yellow, too. The Wild West just fucking sucks. "I'm working for the..." Eddie began, but was interrupted by Buster humming an 80s power ballad to himself as he continued to unload piss on the outside of an outhouse. He kept pissing for 10 minutes straight. Then he shook it off a couple of times, zipped his pants up, and said, "Okay, shoot." "Listen, Buster," Papa Eddie said. "I'm working a show for the great Peg-Leg Howell, the kind of country 12 bar, and his demands are, well, demanded. From a purely business-oriented perspective," I replied in a low voice, "it is in my best interest to tell you that while I may not fully understand what is going on around me, I am one of the most competent and accomplished musicians on the entire planet. And if you'd allow me my big break, I could..." "Does he want me to fart on stage?" Buster asked, interrupting me. There was a brief pause before Eddie replied, "No, you see, much like Eddie Van Halen, Peg-Leg Howell is a true showman. He wants some kind of spectacle." "Does he want me to fart on stage?" Buster asked again. "No, Buster. Do you still have that alien blaster we found in Rotundi's fun box?" "No," Buster replied. "I sure don't. I lost it almost immediately because of, well, it's a long story, I guess." "That is truly a crying shame," Eddie replied, actually crying. "See, good old Peg-Leg Howell, the kind of country 12 bar really wants something excited to happen on stage, and who's more exciting than the rebel outlaw Buster Crow?" "To answer your question," Buster replied, "Gandhi, but we can still put on a badass show for old Peg-Leg Howell, the kind of country 12 bar. How much gas he got in that hog? I could drive this baby for 7 years straight and refill it hundreds of times," he replied. What the fuck does that even mean? Where the fuck am I? Who the fuck is Peg-Leg Howell? "As per usual," Buster said, "I have no idea what you're talking about. But let's go anyway! Yeehaw!" And just like that, we were out of there. Buster, Papa Eddie, and I rode on for what seemed like hours as Buster drunkenly directed him to some mine shaft he had fallen down only a few days previous during an encounter with the Cavern People and Monsieur Sesudia Mortier, which he kept clarifying to us all was the French Magellan equivalent. Unfortunately for us, we finally got to the mine shaft. It was all boarded up. "Dang, flabbit!" Buster yelled. "It's all boarded up." "Well, what are we gonna do?" Papa Eddie asked, wheezing like he just ran a mile. "Oh, please," I yelled out. "Hand me that crowbar over there." Buster grabbed the crowbar, sat on top of an old crate, and threw it at my head. Luckily, I caught it and my head didn't get bashed in, which I was pretty frickin' happy about. I walked over to the mine shaft and snapped one of the wood planks off the entrance. "Okay," Buster said. "You managed to bust loose one of these planks. You understand what I'm saying, yeehaw, etc., but I can't fit in there." "Okay, I'll do it even though this may all be a simulation," I said, thinking that maybe I just ingested a bunch of hallucinogenics and I'm actually still at that Fish concert. If you can squeeze into that mine shaft and grab us some sticks of dynamite, we'll put on the best damn country 12-bar performance since Bumblebee Slim played the sloppy drunk blues on the cathedral, Buster exclaimed. Bold, Eddie agreed. I tried slowly easing myself into the cavern, but ended up falling right on my ass. I couldn't see anything, but I just heard tiny little whispers from the cavern, so I got pretty freaked out. "Okay, I'm in," I yelled. "I don't see any dynamite in here, though. Are you sure there's some down here?" "Check under the rocks," Buster yelled back. "It's all rocks." "Oh, wait," Buster said firmly. "I just remembered I had a few sticks of dynamite in my pockets already. Ha ha!" "Oh, fucking sweet," Eddie exclaimed. "Hell yeah!" I said as I climbed my dirty, dusty, beat-up, feeble body out of that dark, scary, angry, living cavern. "All right," Buster yelled to us as leader of the pack. "Let's get our pointed knees away from this dusty shaft. Quick, Smart, or Peg Leg will be without his country dynamite, you weasels." But of course, it wasn't that easy. We all sat back down on Papa Eddie's badass hog, but as soon as he revved it up, the engine died out. We had another major catastrophe on our tiny hands. We were out of gas. I looked at my watch and I told them we had just a tick past an hour to get to the show in time, and Buster started shrieking like a very vocal owl. After brainstorming for like 10 straight minutes, we decided to walk to Buster's neighbor, who was over 5 miles away, the home of his recently deceased partner in crime, Big Jeremiah Burston, and so we walked. And though it seemed endless, it was only a brisk 30-minute travel before we arrived at Big Jeremiah's. When we got there, we noticed Big Jeremiah's mother was casually riding the horse we needed around in their backyard, so I shot her twice in the upper arm with Buster's pistol, and we made off with our new equestrian friend. We rode faster than any human had ever ridden a horse before or since. Seriously, I called Guinness, but they weren't interested in selling me any beer since they hadn't been established yet, so I didn't even bother calling Ripley's, believe it or not. We had 3 minutes to make it to the show. "Well, he'll probably start late anyway," Buster quipped. "You know, musicians and all that." Yee-hoo! In the distance, I could faintly see it. Club Chavez. It appeared to slowly in the dense fog that made up the wily wilderness. The sun was setting. The patrons were starting to fill up the club. We were going to make it. "You did it, Buster!" Papa Eddie yelled at the top of his lungs. "God damn it, you did it!" "I'm a very good at being a rebel outlaw. I declare the proof is in the pudding," Buster said inexplicably. "Whoa, you understand?" he said to his horse, which halted immediately. I sure do want to thank you," Buster," Papa Eddie congratulated. "You've been nothing but the most dastardly bastard in all of Avocado Falls, and tonight Country 12 Bar will reign supreme." Buster spit in a spittoon, then simply said, "Yes." "And you too, Miss Bordeaux," Eddie said to me. "Without you, we never would have been able to open that mine shaft or incapacitate Mrs. Burston." "Yeah," Buster said. "You did a pretty good job out there. I could really use your help in catching my horse. See, he ran off and well, shit, I'll tell you later. Pegleg's about to start." In the nick of time, Papa Eddie ran on stage and set up the dynamite display, and the crowd began to gather together to watch the king of Country 12 Bar perform a few of his classics. I never heard the guy before, but hearing him play the somber Rolling Mill Blues, it was hard not to get lost listening to Pegleg's beautiful guitar work. "You know, it's days like today that make being a rebel outlaw one of the greatest occupations in the world," Buster said with a tear in his eye. He then laughed as Pegleg continued to play. Suddenly, all the dynamite Papa Eddie put on stage erupted in a fiery and chaotic explosion. Screams came from all around me, and bodies were thrown back and forth as the entire building was completely destroyed. It was a fucking bloodbath. I don't have time to really explain everything else that happened. It was really just a month-long sidetrack of my life. But know this. We visited a haunted motel. I fought some toxic alligators. Got shot in the hip. Ouch. We took down the evil sheriff, and we even got Buster's horseback. But that'll all be a separate novella. God, I gotta write a bunch of novellas once I'm done with this shit. Anyway, Papa Eddie was clearly not from the Wild West, so I asked him how I could get back to my time period. He then introduced me to a scientist named Sawyer Macaroni, a blind madman who had been arrested from experimentation on alligators. Funnily enough, that's why those alligators I fought earlier were toxic, but I didn't know that at the time. Anyway, he basically figured out the key to time travel and built this super cool device. Only problem was we had to get struck by lightning. Piece of cake, I thought. I know exactly how. I had Sawyer start up the machine, get everything to working order, and set the time to the exact day I was sent back in time. Me and Buster stood in the time machine, and I simply uttered the words, "Here you go, Burton Fungler. Why don't you take these musicians for your Philharmonic?" I was immediately struck by Roshiro Jackson's lightning and sent to the future with Buster. Of course, Sawyer, stupid bastard, overshot me by a mile. I had to play my gig in less than 10 minutes and I had no time to find new recruits. Me and Buster raced to the club I was playing my gig at, which coincidentally was called the Club Chavez Memorial Bar and Grill. I introduced Bebop and Rocksteady to Buster, then I smacked them both upside the head for referring me to Klein. Hell, I didn't even get my laser blaster. What a shitty diversion. Nevertheless, the gig was great. Bebop played some great riffs, Rocksteady demolished Old Skins. Brunwick did immediately give up on bongos and just started hyping us up. Loud Mongo annihilated the synth leads, and I played a chunky, face-melting bass solo. On top of all that, I played that Prince diss track. The crowd loved it. Pretty good song. Yeah. Chapter 10. Brand Awareness. I didn't notice it at first, but the conch was getting bigger. Every day it grew 3 times its size. I was in a casino in Reno, by the name of Carino, checking out the stone-cold stud at the coat checkout. He had a really tiny face on his quite massive head, no neck, very round shoulders, long string bean arms, a wavy torso, 3 butt cheeks. I wasn't sure about this one, and oily shins. He was, in all respects, the perfect gentleman. I wasn't courting at the moment, but if I were, he wouldn't have known what hit him. Newsflash, a rock. Flirting 101, throw a rock. The bigger the better. The same can be said of one's elbows, but that's another story for another day. Shit, I'm gonna have to make another novella on that too, aren't I? I better not let the publisher read this book, or I'll be on the hook for like 14 novellas by the end of this. Nevertheless, round elbows are desirable. This is just common sense. That being said, if I were courting, I would have also approached the lady who gave me all my cool casino coins. They call them casino coins here. She had no hair, her brain was exposed, she had a very lovely watch. She was a real eye treat, and everyone would say that I'm extremely cool, which is almost as desirable as round elbows. Round elbows obviously edge out being cool because having round elbows in and of itself is cool. Really killing two birds with one stone on that one. Speaking of, that expression makes no sense to me. I've tried killing two birds with one stone before, and it's impossible. I just keep killing the one bird. I've killed thousands of birds trying to get that double kill, and I don't think it's possible. Put me down for a novella on that too. I think I have unique insight. I was in the Carino, checking out all the studs and dimes, attempting to gamble but not really understanding the concept, and most importantly, looking and acting very cool. It was all a trick though, for I had really entered the Carino to bag some guy named Spud McDud, crooner of the West. He was described as a living potato, but when I finally came face to face with him, it became clear that he was actually just a mushy man. Now, I'm certainly not claiming that it would be impossible to bake him, nor would I make the claim that slicing and dicing him would be unappealing. In short, it would be very appealing. I would eat his insides, and I would feel no shame. Yeah, okay, before you point it out to me, I'll just come out and say it. I'm getting ahead of myself. Do you feel happy now? Are you glad you interrupted my playful meditations on cannibal curiosity just so we could move this narrative along at a pace that pleases you more? Speaking of, I don't fucking care about pacing. Sorry, fellas, life isn't well paced. And neither is this book. Although, admittedly, I do add dumb shit into the book, making it a little slower just so the reader has to suffer a little bit more. You gonna cry? Get a tissue and wipe your ass with it. I don't care about your tears. All I care about is the paycheck. And trust me, it's a-comin'. I'm gonna be rich. Rich gal, and you all will just be wiping your stupid asses with tissues like fucking weirdos. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Before I ran into Spud McDud, I had a very weird run-in with, I guess, destiny. See, I was playing the slots with some of my casino coins when I looked down at the conch and I realized it had grown to human size and I could no longer carry it. I then had an even weirder realization. I didn't look down at it at all. I was actually looking up. It was now a massive earring with a doorway. And I looked at the cute coat rack gentleman and I said, if I don't come out of the store in 10 minutes, cry me a frickin' river. I walked in the door and had entered eternal nothingness. The blank slate. I wandered the walls of the white inconsequentiality for minutes, then hours, then days. I was consumed in blinding abstract eternality, and I felt equally dazed and blazed. Now, I had experimented with marijuana in college. I didn't go to college, but attended a rave held at a dorm room at the Terry Fader School for Twisted Minds. As an aside, I'm not into the Chemical Brothers. The blank void was interjected only briefly by a voice simply repeating the word, nubs. I felt my mind start to shake and dance. Nubs, nubs, nubs. I started whistling and singing to myself. Nubs, nubs, nubs. The crushing airlessness lodged through my eyes and encapsulated my brain, crushing it and reanimating it. Nubs, nubs, nubs. Before long, I was just a drawing, or better yet, a concept sketch. I was just a blotch of ink on an endless roll of paper. Nubs, nubs, nubs. Then suddenly the nubs stopped. With the nubs, I stopped. Then Joan Rivers appeared. "Hey, you moron!" Joan Rivers yelled at me. Joan Rivers, I yelled. Then I thought for a second. Hey, who gave you the power to reverse death? Can anybody do that after they die? Does it have something to do with being stuck in the conch? How did you get in the conch? Are you actually dead or just stuck in here trying to break free? If so, how can you dispensate life and death? What the hell is going on? I'll tell you this, Joan Rivers punches harder than any ghost I've ever met. Hell, she punched me so hard, right in the nose, and it was like she wasn't dead at all. It turns out actually that she wasn't dead at all. I won't bore you with the details because she talks a lot and a half of what she said was insult comedy. The gist of it is this. She was put into a weird suction contraption by someone named Lord Krang and spat into the conch like a loogie. She was unable to leave because the crab bastard Rashuro Jackson had placed a curse on the conch, turning it into a void of eternal nothingness. He's a dumbass crab though, so his stupid curse also made the conch continuously grow until it grew a door. I'll tell you this about evolution. I suspect humans will grow so big that we will all have doors attached to our butts. No door on my butt, though. No, sir. I left the conch and locked the door behind me. I was gonna let Joan Rivers out eventually, but she was being kind of a dick, so I wanted to make her suffer a little bit more. I'll come back to the conch, though. Eventually. She'll just have to listen to the nubs. Weirdly, not the first time I've said that sentence, although the other time was at a swap meet and under drastically different circumstances. After ditching the conch, I had to put my clothes back on to meet Spud McDud. Oh yeah, this was a nudist casino. I was wearing a deep blue skin-tight morph suit, though. I assume either no one wanted to correct me on the matter, or they just suspected my natural skin tone was deep blue. One person made a passing reference to Avatar to me, but I'm not a fucking nerd, so I had no idea what that meant. I kicked him in the nards. That person, Albert Einstein. I kid. It was Jay Leno. Good luck getting the mental image of Jay Leno's nards out of your head. Yuck. I put on my tuxedo and headed upstairs to the Carino Dining Hall and Entertainment Lounge. Spud McDud was exactly as I expected. Not a potato. I knew the folks back home were lying about that. There was literally no way he was a living, breathing potato, but everybody said it was so. Well, here I am, officially saying it ain't so. So, listen, I didn't even let him speak. I just put a bag over his head and dragged him downstairs. He was heavier than a sack of potatoes. In case you were wondering, yes, he was also naked. I was the only person wearing clothes in this establishment. If you're looking for an explanation, you're not gonna get one. Fine, you wore me down. I was sunburnt. Everywhere. Okay, so I threw Spud in the back of the van and had Brunwick drive the van off a cliff. Well, actually, I didn't want Spud McDud for the Philharmonic. I just wanted to murder him. It didn't work, though. He was completely fine. Well, in the explosive chaos of the crash, his nard somehow flew off, but that's par for the course, I'm afraid. Since he survived, I figured we might as well take him to Fungler because, let's face it, working for Bert and Fungler is a punishment that's worse than death. We took Spud McDud and a separate jar containing his nards into my private jet. Didn't even fasten his seatbelt either, lol, we just let him hang on the side of the plane. And flew halfway across the world to Rare Groove. I will never ever tell the reader where Rare Groove is located on the map, because that would encourage that town to install even more tourist traps. Just because I wrote this bestseller, but now you know it's halfway across the world from Reno, so do with that as you will. In case you were wondering, by the way, the tourist traps are literally traps meant to attack and maim Rare Groove visitors, and in some unique examples, literal traps that will keep one encaged until they either die or the authorities come and let them free. Since Rare Groove's only law enforcement is just one old guy named Mellow Ronnie, your chances of dying in the trap were more likely. You could feasibly eat some of the eggs that constantly grow from Rare Groove's earth and sip the egg water from its humble core, but you'd just be prolonging a slow and pitiful death. No citizen will help you either. I'm still not sure what it means, but apparently they can't because they are bound by sound-ass law. Fungler approached me and Brenwick looking grimmer than the Reaper himself. Never met that guy. Mrs. Mofongo, I have grave news, he said darkly. Mr. Fanglish. What? I replied, lightly. Just received a call from Meatsbrook Amphitheater, where the Fungler Philharmonic is set to perform our first show, and, don't tell me those bastards canceled, I yelled, spitting phlegm all over Fungler's face. He was used to it. No, they didn't cancel, he replied. Then what's the problem, baby? Brenwick asked. They changed the date. The Philharmonic performs the day after tomorrow. Chapter 11. Comic-Con. After Fungler told me the date had been pushed up, I was so stressed out, I practically invented a new brew of coffee to deal with my thunderous head. I say practically because I didn't invent a new brew of coffee to deal with my thunderous head. I thought about doing that at first, but no. I thought, I have too much to do, so instead I just did a crap load of cocaine. I'm just kidding! A crap load makes it seem like not that much. It was really a shitload. Now that I'm thinking about it, though, what is bigger, a crap load or a shitload? Much to think about. The first thing I did was return to the Carino and retrieve the conch, which, by the time I had arrived, had mysteriously shrunk back down to its original size. I put it in my pocket and went on my merry way. See, I knew there was only one place where I was going to find enough musicians to fill Fungler's Philharmonic in 2 days' time. That's right. Comic-Con. Think about it. All the stars. Shatner, Kato, Stan Lee, who for some reason didn't attend. Chewbacca, etc. It was really ideal. I obviously don't know anything about nerd culture because I'm too busy ruling the world with my jet airliner. Okay, go to YouTube and type in Jet Airliner by Steve Miller Band. I'll wait. Awesome song, right? Okay, if you need any more clarification on what I do or do not know about nerd culture, please see my stance on Avatar. Okay, so here's the deal. I arrived at Comic-Con looking like a lost baby puppy. There were so many nerds, so many celebrities. I put celebrities in quotes because no one there was as famous as me. So many merch booths. Brenwick, I said to Brenwick, the talking envelope beside me. I don't know how this is gonna work. How do I know who would be compatible with the Philharmonic? Lucky for you, Toots, he replied. I know more about nerd culture than George Takei, who was the guy who directed Star Wars, by the way. I knew then and there that loose change wasn't the only thing Brenwick had stored in that envelope of his. He also had a brain. Albeit, I didn't quite understand how his brain worked or where biologically it could be found if one were to dissect him, but I was nonetheless overjoyed that he had nerd experience unlike me, who was a bona fide legend experience. For about an hour and a half, Brenwick rubbed shoulders with the great, some guy from Game of Thrones, a weird furry creature from Star Trek, Dave Matthews. Not sure why he was there. Hell, even a blue, small talking head called the Great Guru. It was a ton of fun. For Brenwick, that is. I hated it. Let's just say I ran into Felicia Day one too many times. We have a long withstanding feud that I would only feel comfortable sharing in a memoir. Just checked, and yes, this is a memoir, but I'm still not gonna get into it. You better hope for a sequel. Anyway, after some time passed, we had it narrowed down to 3 candidates. Warwick Davis, Elvira, and Kelsey Grammer. Almost immediately, Elvira turned us down. I guess she's too busy having television, film, and advertising crossover appeal. Elvira, if you're reading this, I'm sorry to say that your days are numbered. The second your next commercial deal goes awry, you'll be begging to play bassoon for Fungler. Warwick Davis reminded me a lot of Willow from the movie Willow, so I decided we should probably bag him, and Kelsey Grammer was no-brainer. I was just told that legally I have to refer to him at least twice as Kelsey Grammer, but now that I have met that quota, I will refer to him only as Frasier. What I assumed at the time was his given name. Frasier, I says to him, we have a very lucrative offer for you. Miss, he began. I'm listening. So I punched him square in the jaw and bagged him. Once they were in the jet, I informed them that they were unfortunately being hauled a quarter way across the world, just saying, to Rare Groove, where they will meet Burton Fungler. Frasier knew Fungler, said they were old colleagues back at the church camp. Not sure what that is, or if Frasier was just trying to distract me while he jumped out of the plane, but nevertheless, I handcuffed him for the remark. I landed the plane in town square for perhaps the third time this week, this time right on Griffley's head. Not sure how he survived, but he did. Fungler came a-shuffling out of the Fungler School for Boys like a diseased beetle. He guffawed and furrowed, even did a combat roll on his way to my jet. Ms. McFarkus, he screeched like a melting tortoise. Have you got more members for my Philharmonic? Time is running out! First of all, just so everyone is clear on this, my fucking name is Flora McFauna. Let me spell that out for you. Flora. Got that? McFauna. I don't want anyone to mispronounce it or say something altogether unrelated for the rest of this narrative. And if anyone does speak my name falsely, I will take 2 of the many grenades I have bought from Uncle Pippo, gouge your eyes out with my fingernails, and replace them with the grenades. I won't even set them off. I'll just let them sit there, slowly making your eye holes bigger. I'll have the pins just at the edge of falling out. So one day, when they inevitably fall out of your new eye holes, they will hit the ground and explode, causing pounds of worthless meat to fly all over the town square. My name is Flora McFauna. Flora McFauna. I don't care that you're like 100 years old. If you don't call me by my real name from this point forward, I'll put a spell on Fuzzbucket to make him go feral. Fungler wasn't listening. Anyway, I continued, this is Warwick Davis and Frasier. Great, Miss McMullen, he replied. Well, I don't know how long it takes to get from there to Rare Groove and back, but it's been 2 days. My heart sank in my ass. You mean? I asked, quaking in delicious fear. The Philharmonic performs in 1 hour! As he said that, Fish, Fuzzbucket, and Spud McDudd raced from the Fungler School for Boys behind him. Well, that's okay, I thought. Fish is 4 guys, Fuzzbucket is 1 strange creature, Spud McDudd is 1 wily potato, and now we have a Warwick and Frasier. That's pretty good, right? This is enough people, right? This is enough people, right? Brenwick asked weirdly. You have been nothing but an utter disappointment, Miss McMissus. Fungler spoke unto me. I asked for a Philharmonic, and you brought me 5 guys, a strange creature, a wily potato, and Frasier fucking Crane! How short are we? I asked. I was referring to the amount of people we needed for the Philharmonic. I myself am not short at all. 5'8". Yes, sir. I'm afraid I need 10 more people for this Philharmonic to be complete, Ms. McFauna, he responded. A viola player, 2 cellists, a baritone sax, a marimbist, 3 bongo players, a lead vocalist and lead guitarist. Conveniently, the lead guitar is only needed for the last possible moment, where whoever will be selected to play gets to shred an awesome solo. Touched that he got my name right finally, I was more motivated than ever. "Fungler!" I howled. "Let's get you to that auditorium. Before the hour is through, I will have fully assembled the Fungler Philharmonic." Chapter 12. The Fungler Philharmonic. I drove Fungler to the venue quicker than you can say. Well, I didn't really have time to be thinking of snappy witticisms at the moment. I was too busy racing for my life. The point is, I got him there really quick, and even though he said the venue was in Meatsbrook, I must have let it completely slip my mind, because when we arrived in that dastardly clown town, I knew trouble was afoot. I had no idea what I was in for. I threw Fungler out of the jet. He landed on his head and cracked it open. Luckily for him, he's an idiot, so he didn't have anything in his head worth losing. A couple of band-aids and he'll be good as new. I then tossed Fish out, who all landed on their collective heads as well. Fuzzbucket somehow was already on the ground, not sure how that happened. Then I got sick of throwing everyone out, so I just veered right really fast with the jet so everyone in the back just slid out the cabin doors. It was really unsafe, but funny, on like a fart level to me. And sometimes you just gotta do what makes you happy. If seeing Frasier's dumbass fall out of a jet makes me happy, then that's what I'm gonna do. Sorry, but also not sorry. I decided against landing the jet since it would take too much time, so I just hopped out and let it crash in the ocean. Not my problem. Me and Brunwick ran to the now dismantled big station, Big Dreams. There was glass everywhere. Fritos wherever the eye could see. And shit smeared on the walls. Don't know how that happened. When I remember me and Brunwick's cool escape from this place, nowhere in my mind do I see someone smearing poopy on the walls. Oh well, what's done is done. I remember there being an old payphone in the store, so I ran to it and made the most extreme and calculated series of phone calls I've ever made in my life. The first phone call I made was to Uncle Pippo. I know that motherfucker can play viola. He plays coy, but I can see through his humble disguise. Due to our dense and heavily editorialized history, he was one of the few sorry sacks I knew for sure would fly up to Meatsbrook first thing at my word. "I'll be right there," he said. "Yes, you will," I replied in my mind. Believe they call that a thought. The second phone call I made was to Anton Zek and Ivan Starenko. You know them, of course, as Bebop and Rocksteady. They happen to be multidisciplined musicians with a strong focus on sounding somewhat competent. They rarely hit the mark, but they try. And that counts for a lot in this business. I'm really into business, again, by the way. Also, they owed me a hell of a favor after getting me mixed up with Klein Detterman or Lord Krang or whatever the hell his name was. "Sure," they both said in unison. Bebop snorts, then continues, "We'll be right there, boss." Which brings me to my next call. The third phone call I made was to Lord Krang himself, Klein Detterman. I didn't know if he could play an instrument or not, but fuck it, anyone can play the bongos. He owes me big time too for sending me back in time and never selling me a laser blaster. "Why not?" he shrieked. "I'll be there in 10 minutes. The fourth phone call I made was to Buster Crow, because I was thinking about Klein and bongos and figured Buster would probably be fine. Plus he could bring some dynamite for the stage show. It would be divine. "Oh, yuck," he yelped. "I'll be there before the cow crows. Giddy up." He also mumbled about how some show called Scrubs for over a minute before I interrupted him because I have important stuff to do. The fifth call I made was to a rat bastard named Lincoln Bio. I called him, but I already knew he'd be free and available since I stowed him away in the jet's trunk. Shit, I crashed the jet. Oh well, good thing I'm calling him. Yes, Lincoln replied painfully. Come back up to the Cloud Town. We gotta perform. Can you play baritone sax? He hung up on me, but I was 90% sure he was coming. Either way, I sent Brunwick out to see to it that it makes it back up safely. Safety is my greatest concern. The sixth call I made was to Sound Ass. I knew Grant and Eric could play poorly, so I figured they could play bongos and marimba, respectively. And respectfully, they suck. They're pretty awful, and when I think back on this whole series of events, I have to say they performed worst than anyone else there. And they were musicians. It is beyond astonishing that they were outperformed by Buster Crow. But that's just how the cookie crumbles. Is it paid? They asked. When I told them no, they asked me to print out a sheet of paper that said tips are appreciated and mandatory. At first I didn't want to oblige since I hate Sound Ass, but it was a good idea and a great way to earn extra cash, so I pay for a potato launcher. Fingers crossed on that one. The seventh call I made was perhaps the toughest call I have ever made in my entire life. I put the feud aside, swallowed my pride, and called Lizard Prince. He's a no-brainer for lead vocals, and it would be a huge get for Fungler. We talked on the phone for over 10 minutes, arguing about this and that. We finally agreed to some terms. For starters, I would have to announce to the crowd that he is cooler than me. For Fungler, I would oblige that. Secondly, he wants to do it fully nude. The idea of a giant lizard schlong bouncing around and knocking people over was chaotic in a way that I wasn't fully on board with, but I had to applaud it as a legitimate business strategy. Thirdly, he wanted me on lead guitar. Okay, that part isn't true. I'm editorializing a little bit. The thing is, I wanted to play lead guitar, so I told Fungler that Lizard Prince wanted me to play lead guitar. And look, the point is that I was slated to play lead guitar, okay? Finally, with Uncle Pippo on viola, bebop and rocksteady on cello, Lincoln Bio on baritone sax, Eric on marimba, Grant on bongo, Klein on bongo, Buster Crow on bongo, Flora on lead guitar, Fuzz Bucket on violin, Spud McDudd on harp and backup vocals, Warwick Davis on tambourine, Fraser Crane on triangle, and Fish on guitar, bass, drums, and keys, the Fungler Philharmonic had finally been assembled. I stepped outside, big station, big dreams, and sprinted over to the Meatsbrook Amphitheater when I tripped and fell on my ass. My face landed squarely on the dirty shoes of a wide-snide and politely unwise guy called Fry. Fry, I gibed. Why, oh why must I spy with my little eye the sight of Fry? I cried, fried, and full of pride. Miss McFauna, he replied in his gravelly and gross voice, long time no see. I immediately, and I mean immediately, punched him in the colon. Uncle Pippo told me that the colon is actually the best place to punch someone, and he also told me that if I step on their feet and push their forehead, they'll fall over like a tiny baby. I tried it, but he was moving too fast. In the distance, I could see Uncle Pippo, Bebop, Rocksteady, Lincoln Bio, Sound Ass, Klein, Buster, Crow, Fuzz Bucket, Warwick Davis, Fraser, Spud McDudd, and Fish, all walking into the theater. A few minutes later, music began to play. The show was starting. Fuck! Fry! I yelped. What did I do to you? I mean, can't you see I've got bigger fish to fry? Get it? Do you get that? You think you can kill my cousins, get away with it, huh? He replied. Your cousins, who are they? Don't tell me you've forgotten about the Frusciato brothers. Oh, shit. I totally did kill the Frusciato brothers. In fact, I think I killed them twice. Or did I just escape them? I really can't remember. Go back and reread that part and tell me. I'll wait here. Okay. Yeah, I see. I just ran away. That makes sense. Well, anyway, Fry took this thing out of his pocket. I forget what they're called. Those things that you use to tase somebody? Like if you want to incapacitate them during combat? There's definitely a word for that. A word for whatever that device is called. The device that is used to tase someone. That device. There's a name for that, but I can't think. Maybe taserizer? Surely there's a better name for it than that. Fuck it. I can't think of it. If you can think of it, shoot me an email. My assistant Goosey reads all the emails. I promise. Anyway, he took his stun gun and shot me in the stomach. I was seizing on the ground when out of the corner of my eye, I spied Brunwick flying faster than a speeding bullet towards Fry. He sliced his neck like it was nothing. And due to the extreme speed in which Brunwick was flying, he actually lopped Fry's head clean off. It landed on my stomach and knocked the wind out of me, which was so cool. Brunwick, you've yet again saved my sorry booty from the twisted hands of fate. I'm sorry I once almost killed you with my reckless flying. I suppose you could say that I'm reckless, but not reckless. I spoke unto Brunwick, like wreck with a W. Do you get that? Is that funny? Do you get it? Hey, listen, babe. He said like a superstar. I get it, okay? A booyah! Now was finally my moment. Me and Brunwick walked hand in hand, well, hand in paper, into the Meatsbrook Amphitheater. The crowd roared when I entered the room. The Philharmonic's cover of Limelight by Rush was just finishing up, and Fungler turned around and saw me in the back, walking towards the stage. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is Flora McFauna. The crowd went absolutely insane. Everyone stood up and turned towards me, hooting and hollering. I must admit that it made me cry, because cool kids can cry. I began to bow, but first turned to Brunwick and whispered to him plainly that I simply would not bow without him. So, together, hand in paper, me and Brunwick bowed to an adoring audience. I climbed on stage with Brunwick and strapped on my guitar. The crowd was still going nuts. I glanced around the stage at all the remarkable talent I had put together, and I felt nothing but pride and a little bit of gas because I hit up a Taco Bell a few hours prior. I walked up to the microphone. Lizard Prince stepped aside, and I spoke to the crowd. Tens, bromans, country friends, lend me your ear. Is it not every day that we rise and shine? We wake up and smell the coffee for what? For moments like these, baby. Also, I'm obligated to say that Lizard Prince is cooler than me. I winked at Lizard Prince. He smiled bashfully. And that's why, for the first time at the Meatsbrook Amphitheater, we will be performing Lowrider by War. Sound-S began playing What a Fool Believes by the Doobie Brothers instead, and everyone else in the band just kind of rolled with it. We got about 5 seconds in, however, before the Foreshadow Brothers literally broke through the theater walls like they were the Kool-Aid Man. Flora McFauna! They all yelled at once. We challenge you to a duel to settle this once and for... But before they could finish their sentence, Buster Crow detonated all the dynamite he had set up for the show's special effects. The foreshadows exploded into a million tiny little pieces. Raw foreshadow meat being flung all over every square inch of the amphitheater. Where they once stood on the stage was now replaced with a gross, bloody mess of ooze and ligaments that Lizard Prince immediately leaned over and licked clean. It was futile, however, because before we could get An additional 10 seconds into the song, I was struck by lightning, for what now feels like the millionth time. And the crab bastard Rashuro Jackson descended from the heavens. I knew it was coming, so I took the liberty of removing my guitar and preparing myself for battle. See, I took the tase thing from Fry's cold, dead body, so I was more ready than ever for an encounter with Rashuro Jackson. What did I tell you about sticking your nose where it didn't belong? He honked. What did I tell you about... But I couldn't think of anything, so I just yelled, "Shut up, crab scum!" And then I shot him with the stun gun. He seized for like a fraction of a second, then was basically completely normal again. Just like that, he pummeled me like a bag of cinder blocks. I felt the weight of 1,000 gods pushed onto me. I was all but completely vanquished. I felt similar to how Bert and Fungler looks, just completely torn up, crushed, and mangled. I thought about that time I almost died and all those memories I wandered throughout beside my brain. I thought about my parents and about Brunwick and about my old town, the Wild West, Rare Groove, Juicy Jazzland, everything. I had a whole life worth living, and Rashuro Jackson was trying to impede me from being my very best self. "Look, Rashuro!" I yelled. The room fell completely silent. I may not be an internal crab god, but I know an asshole when I see one, and I bet if you turn around and bend down, I'll see one. Understand? The crowd mumbled a little bit in confusion. Listen, I continued. I grew up in the middle of a backwards town in nowhere, Arizona. And I turned my humble beginnings into reaching my goal of being a worldwide pilot icon. I've traveled to Meatsbrook. The crowd cheered a little bit at that super tacky. I traveled to Rare Groove. Hell, I even traveled to Norco. She suffer Fuzzbucket said. And look at me now, I continued. We're at a sold-out theater for an adoring crowd, playing some of the best songs ever recorded. All I have to say is that if you want to kill me for assembling the greatest damn Philharmonic this world has ever seen, then go ahead. But look around, Rashuro. The Philharmonic is complete. If you kill me, you'd be wasting your time. Yeah, he replied. Time ain't that valuable for me. I'm a crab. Not sure what that means, I answered back. But I'll tell you this, if you really want to kill me, then I won't stop you. The only thing you'll have to deal with is Brunwick. Grab the conch. I turned to my right a little bit, and Brunwick grabbed the conch from my back pocket and lobbed it at Rashuro, who swallowed it whole. A few seconds later, I heard a magical poof sound, and Joan Rivers emerged from the conch with the speed of a cheetah, causing Rashuro's body to explode from the inside. Soon, we all saw Joan Rivers wearing Rashuro Jackson's skin. Then the skin began to tear and pop before snapping off of her body like elastic. It was the loudest sound I've ever heard, like the cracking of a powerful whip. The crowd fell completely silent. Everyone was stunned. Hell, even Bebop and Rocksteady stopped snorting for long enough to marvel in the monumental moment that just manifested. Joan Rivers wandered around the stage a little bit, recovering from her sea legs, conch legs, before walking up to the microphone and saying simply, "Let's party, bitches." Sound-ass began playing What a Fool Believes again, and all was well. The after party may have been even better than the event itself. I mean, everyone was there. Hugh Butters, Funk Diamond, Gooey Sanders, Griffley, Kato, Terry Fader, my mom, even Pegleg Howell, the king of country 12 Bar, except this time he had 2 peg legs. We all danced and partied and did karaoke for like 6 hours straight. It was nuts. My mom brought an interpreter with her, and she basically just said that I was really cool and awesome or something. I didn't really understand the interpreter either. I was just glad she was there. After things died down a little bit, I was sitting on the roof of the amphitheater looking out at the stars and down at the ground many miles away. I was throwing rocks down and trying to get them to land on this guy's head. I'd later find out that guy was good bit and that I actually did hit his head several times. My aim is true, so they say. Brunwick came up beside me and sat down, or laid down. Again, I don't really understand what he's doing most of the time because his body's so different from mine. Hey, we did good in there, didn't we, Toots? Brunwick evoked. We sure did, Brunwick, I replied. Flossinessinifictionally. What you thinking about? He asked. Let me just repeat that word. Flossinessinifictional. That is a made-up word. Just FYI. And then he asked me, what you thinking about? I didn't realize it until he mentioned it, but I was thinking about the time I jumped off that building in front of my high school boyfriend Humphrey G. I vowed never to jump off a building again and attempt to fly. Humans can't fly. They cry. Maybe I lied. Why? Just try. Poor Humphrey. I probably scared him half to death. Anyway, I guess I was just feeling a little sentimental. I had just had one of the greatest nights of my life, and now I'm sitting here in the middle of the night looking down and thinking of the past. So, fuck it. I broke my only rule, and I leapt off that fucking amphitheater like it was nobody's business. And when I was halfway down, I distinctly remember thinking, oh shit, right, I really can't fly. But in the nick of time, Brunwick got underneath me and let me glide upon his head. I was doing it! I was flying! We soared for hours and hours, seeing all 7 wonders of the world, and I never felt more free. Or powerful, for that matter. At the end of the day, it was a great moment with a great friend, and we lived happily ever after. No, I actually splat onto the concrete like a piece of chewing gum. I had to get all my bones replaced. LOL. Small price to pay in exchange for being a badass. Afterward. So there you have it. My life. My story. I want to make one thing very clear. Earlier in the book, I said that chimpanzees sometimes hunt and eat small mammals such as bushbuck or monkeys. I could just tell you motherfuckers thought chimpanzees were monkeys. I'm sorry, no one taught you that chimpanzees are apes. I shouldn't have yelled, and like I said anyhow, they eat fruit, nuts, seeds, blossoms, leaves, and many kinds of insects, too. So, what did we learn? Well, I learned how to waste about a week of my life writing this stupid-ass memoir that's just to get off the hook for those egg murders in Rare Groove. Oh yeah, that's why there's a really depressing chapter right before the campaign chapter. I was trying to make myself seem more vulnerable and relatable so that you side with me when I inevitably aid Soundass in all those killings. Yeah, none of that stuff was real. Especially all the stuff about my feelings and stuff, lol. Also, I learned how to make a giant bucket and attach it to a helicopter. I've used that trick many times since, and it works wonders every time. After the great amphitheater performance, I settled nicely into my new job as aviatrix for Soundass. See, Klein, who is also Krang, is Soundass's manager, so he decided to keep me on payroll after the performance. I now room with some guy named Goosey Soderbergh, who is a weird Shakespearean poet and heroin addict. He's kind of twisted and says things that have me like this, like basically like picture a capital O and then a line and then another capital O. That's the face I'm making. Yeah. I may change rooms with Kato so I can stay with Goodbit. He's a real interesting guy, and I can tell he's got stories to tell. On weekends, Flora McFauna's House of Funk still plays, and we actually put out a song a few months ago called The Art of Being Very Cool, featuring Lizard Prince. That was nominated for a Grammy, so that's pretty huge. Our band is also playing backup for some weird rock band called Crap Stacks. The lead singer is a convicted murderer, so I'm pretty much just trying to get that paycheck and get out of there. What else? Oh yeah, me and Buster Crow met for brunch every Tuesday and Thursday, which is really nice. I'm thinking we may head back to the Old West sometime soon if Klein will allow. Also, link in bio, apparently sustained a serious head injury from when I crashed that jet airliner with him in it, so he's pressing charges on that. Can't win them all. Me and my mother are on good terms, and I actually sent my dad a postcard that contained a picture of me mooning the camera with "Heck you" written on both my butt cheeks, so my family life is healthier than ever before. What's next for me, you ask? Well, first of all, I'm not taking questions. Okay, Larry King, this isn't a freaking Q&A. Understood? This is a book. You shouldn't even be talking. If you've been talking to the book, then I'm sorry. I haven't responded, but I'm also like, not sorry? I don't know. Nevertheless, I have to write all these stupid-ass novellas you begged me for. Then I got up here at all the relevant court dates for the assaults, murders, thefts, etc. Should be a cakewalk. Then I'll probably pay a lump sum of cash to the country, and resume my life as the greatest pilot this world has ever seen. Why? Need a ride? You're pathetic. Larry King is dead. Get over it. The end. Acknowledgements. I'd like to thank Brunwick, Burton Fungler, Uncle Pippo, Bebop, Rocksteady, Klein Detterman, Buster, Felix Stavros Crow, Papa Eddie, Sheriff Roundon T, Deputy Fortuna, Dr. Jimiquay, Carrianopolis, Papa Cicero Crow, Sawyer Macaroni, Grimham, Pegleg Howell, Big Jeremiah Burston, and Co. Lincoln Bio, Kato, Good Bit, Bad Bit, Weird Bit, Bone Friedman, Gut, Deuterola, Steve Mike, Art Sickly, Vert Crumb, Moby Dick, Hugh Butters, Funk Diamond, Gooey Sanders, Griffley, Terry Fader, Fuzzbucket, Fish, Spud McDud, who actually goes by Spud McDude now, Michael Chickless, Lizard Prince, Joan Rivers, Loud Mongo, Mr. Flutterby, Fry, Dink Foreshadow, Crothers Foreshadow, Junk Foreshadow, Humphrey G, the doctor named Pam, the nurse named Graham, the talking cat named Sam, Goosey Soderberg, Brother Samuel from the chapel, the Bergen Line, Draco Dumpty, Dolores Dumpty, Dingo Dumpty, Dominic Dumpty, Dressy Dumpty, unrelated, Shives Dumpty, Darius Dumpty, Dang! Dumpty, Baker Dumpty, and Fletch Mardilla Dumpty, Mellow Ronnie, Vrig Stringolt, Warwick Davis, Fraser Crane, my beloved childhood dog Leslie, and, of course, myself. Written by Flora McFauna. Editor and creative consultant, Feck Speiderbeck. A sound-ass presentation. Copyright Dresky Publishing 2021. Blank page. Flora McFauna and the Fungler Philharmonic. A presentation by Soundass.